Hello, and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brandon. Thank you as ever for tuning on in. I feel like we need to get a schedule in place, so now we do have a schedule in place. But before we start into that, I just want to say this live stream show is brought to you by F Custom Jersey. If you're ever looking for a jersey you want customized with just what you want written on the back, none of those silly NFL rules on jerseys and what can be written and what can't be, well, they've got the spot for you. Get it all customized, back, front, left, right, any kind of number, any kind of place you want to put it basically as far as shoulders, back, you can change the numbers if you want. I'll leave that link into the description. Let's dive on in though, shall we? Let's dive on in. And hello, Ahmad and Arzos. Good to see you in here. Well, the first order of business, of course, today and right now as we stand is the trade that happened last week between the Los Angeles Rams and the Detroit Lions. The Rams are able to offload Jared Goff's massive contract, though granted they took the biggest dead cap hit money hit in the history of the NFL. I think it's something like $22 million. Quite a wide swath to take on this trade. They were going to have to do it if they wanted to get out from this trade with as soon as they had signed that deal. When you're in the first couple of years, it's really hard to get without. They found a trading partner here in the Detroit Lions and a guy from Matt Stafford who wanted out of town finally at this point. And the Lions, who are clearly now in rebuild mode and know that there's no reason to try to see if they can squeeze a last drop of hope from the Matt Stafford tree of life. So it's overall, I think, a very good trade from the Rams aspect. You offload some salary, you get a guy in Stafford who we will talk about how much better he is than Goff, but he is certainly an upgrade above what Goff is right now. And it's a good trade from them in this aspect. They clear that money off. Goff's out of their books now. They get on to Stafford. It is going to make things really difficult for them. And for me, I know there's a lot of people out there that are really patting them on the back in this move, at least initially. I think people, more they thought about it, started to go, maybe the Lions actually did okay on this deal if you think about this through a little bit more. And Zoe's says, hi, how you feeling about Stafford, the Rams? Okay, so I'm going right into this, Zoe's. And what's up, Mirza, Fiji, Mark, how you doing? I'm doing great. Jose Rodriguez, good to see you, buddy. It's not the same. You're not in the chat, man. Washi, hey, V-Hawk. So it's a decent trade. This is a win-win trade. I know I will say that a lot of times. I think it's harder in the NFL to just flat out win trades anymore. The analytics coming into play now really don't allow for that to happen as much. You don't see somebody just get taken. Not usually. Usually there's a fair balance game. For instance, a couple years ago, you had the Odell Beckham trade where everybody thought that the Browns had won the trade kind of overall. But then, you look at the Giants. Giants actually look like they kind of win that trade when you consider they got a really good safety in that deal as well, who's been a really useful player for them in that defense. So it's hard to win trades. There's a lot more of a win-win aspect. We saw this with our own team at the start of the season with the Jamal Adams deal, which was certainly a win-win trade. We got an upgrade at the strong safety position, and the Jets got themselves a bevy of picks. Not bad for them at all. This is the same kind of situation where the Lions are getting a good amount of picks. 2 first-rounders and a third for a guy in Stafford who is at the age he is, and he's a little younger, I think, than we all first thought when we looked at this, because we went, oh, yeah, he did come into the league when he was still only 21 years old. So he's only 32 years old. He's not really, I think, in the same kind of age bracket as Russell Wilson. Granted, doesn't have the same kind of mobility he does, but he still has a lot of years left. This isn't the guy that should be a shot fighter, completely done, out of it. No. I would expect him to still come out and perform very well. I think somebody mentioned this last week, but it has echoes to me of the Carson Palmer deal coming up out of Oakland after he had come up out of Cincinnati, kind of just with two organizations that weren't doing anything or doing him any favors for that matter, to finally go to an organization in the Cardinals who had Bruce Arians as a head coach at the time. Arians is, of course, somewhat of the quarterback whisperer. That's how he was known for years. And so that fit really well with Carson, and him and Stafford are kind of very much facsimiles of each other. Both of those big arms, the ball just looks beautiful coming out of their hands, spins really tight. They can throw it a country mile, everything you want in a quarterback from the standpoint of arm strength and arm ability. So again, he is going to upgrade this situation. There's no two ways about it. It is an upgrade. Now, how vast, how far, that's going to remain to be seen, because the injury quotient comes into play here, being that Matt Stafford is certainly getting banged up more and more here over the years as it goes on, and he's been known for being a tough guy, but that's, you accumulate those hits and eventually it all kind of comes to bear. But again, I still expect we're looking at this not through the lens of him playing into his 40s. Can he play to be 36, 37 years old and still play very good football? And I would expect that he could. I don't know if we're going to get a Pro Bowl caliber level of play out of him, But again, this makes it tougher. I'm going to be repeating this a lot. This makes it tougher on the NFC West. This makes the division tougher, and that's why I do call it a minefield, is there's no easy routes. There's no easy we'll just go right through there and be simple. No. Everything is going to be a dogfight every single week, and we all have to kind of take into account that. And especially the Seahawks should be, from a front office management standpoint, of this is a little bit of an arms race. If you want to be one of the teams that's just going to try to stand pat and just be competitive every year, you're going to get left behind in the dust, because these teams are pushing further and further, in my opinion. Certainly, we know the 49ers are going to be back next year. They've got, I think, a quarterback move that they're going to make, which we'll all be talking about here soon. There's rumors of them potentially being fitted up with Kirk Cousins, which is a very interesting fit. But win-win deal. Like the deal for both teams in this respect. Think they did a good job. Both sides of the Lions needed to finally fully buy into their rebuild process. Stafford was never going to give them props to them for doing it. Those picks could be a lot better than people are telling them they're going to be right now. Everybody wants to tell you that now the Rams run away with this. Oh, they're the NFC frontrunners next year. No doubt. Doesn't matter if Tom Brady comes back. Doesn't matter what happens with Aaron Rodgers. They're the frontrunners now. We still understand, you take a $22 million dead money hit just off of one player like quarterback, biggest in history of the NFL, in a year when the cap's going to go down to $180 million, on the heels of a couple of years where you have gone for it at every turn with every move. You're going to have to pay the piper sooner or later. And there's going to be players that are going to lose this offseason off that same defense that everyone tells us is going to be the number one defense next year. You're going to lose a lot of those players as we go into next year now. You are. I think Leonard Floyd's out of there. They've got a restricted tag on one of their cornerbacks that I think is going to be $2-3 million, and I don't know if they're going to be able to pay him. They still have to round out the rest of the roster. They're now another year without a first-round pick. They've been able to do some gymnastics here. I mean, let's give them props. The Rams have been able to get out from under, Cook's deal, Gurley's deal, Goff's deal, all these deals that when they originally signed them, we were all sitting there going, yeah, that one's going to come. They're going to pay the price on that one. And you look what happens in a year from now. That's going to hurt. That's going to sting the pocketbook. And then a year would go on, and then they find some poor sucker like Atlanta to offload Gurley. So the cap hit is a little bit more reduced from what it would have been as a dead money hit. A little bit of that here with they couldn't get out of the dead money hit completely here with Goff, but they did a little bit of that here again. You got to give their general manager props for finding ways to navigate up and down and around that cap to make this work. They're going to be good, but this does not make them the bulletproof choice for front runner. All right, let's get to the chat here. I'm going to give behind already. Fiji Mark, I was talking with my uncle about running backs to replace Carson. We said Fournette, but who else should we go after? There's not a large stable of running backs right now, Fiji Mark. There really isn't. I was looking a little bit more last night at some of the running backs in this draft class. There are some interesting ones, certainly. Not a lot that fit the pedigree of what Seattle really looks for usually in the running back that they want. Once you get past Najee Harris and Javonte Williams into the next rung, I've got to look a little deeper into maybe the 4th, 5th, 6th round guys. But when you're talking about Gainwell, Khalil Herbert, Chuba Hubbard, Michael Carter, I don't know if any of those guys really fit into the Seahawks mold of that Marshawn Lynch type running back that they normally look through. So it's going to have to probably be free agency. Fournette, I know, is one I mentioned. The other guy I think is Kalen Ballage, is a guy that I might take a look at. He's a guy you're going to get a little bit more on the cheap at that point, but he definitely does still kind of fit into that mold. Hasn't been utilized as much in San Diego because you've had, Ingram there for, not Ingram, but the guy that went to Denver there for a few years. Austin Eckler was there has been doing his thing there for a little while. So not able to get as many carries, but he'd be an interesting back to maybe potentially look at. Maybe also, too, the one thing is they may be going outside of their realm of what they look for normally in running backs in the past because of what they're going to ask running backs to now do in this scheme. Specifically, a lot more, in my opinion, outside stuff, a little bit more getting to the edges than the inside stuff. So maybe they will value a little bit more the speed in the running backs. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good suggestions, Fiji, because they're not just because I don't know, but I looked at it. There's not a lot of running backs that are in this free agent class. It's very thin, which is why I think Carson will get paid by somebody a little bit of money. He's not going to break the bank, but somebody's going to give him a little bit of coin. But it's kind of tough sledding. There's a potential into it where you could too, Fiji. Look at this as there's rumors out there that maybe Christian McCaffrey might be available. There's rumors out there that maybe, I haven't heard rumors, but I'm putting my own rumors out there. Is Saquon Barkley available out there? Maybe you look through a trade aspect of things in this realm as well. Go that route instead rather than this first and foremost. The Rocket. How you doing, The Rocket? He says, hello there. I heard about the Stafford trade. To be honest, Stafford should be a good quarterback for LA, but compared to Kurt Warner's years, could be similar situations if the Rams get anywhere with Brett Matt. Yeah, I think Warner is a better player. Was a vastly superior player to Matt Stafford, at least a superior player, maybe not vastly. But the Rocket, I think that Warner was a superior player. He was coming along, with the Cardinals at that time when they had everything kind of just, conjoining and coming together. Whereas with the Rams right now, they're just trying to kind of hold together the last couple of years of this potential run to a Super Bowl before they have to blow it up. So that's one of the things that does come back, frankly, to Rocket as to why I don't necessarily sign off on this trade being a complete win for the Rams. I always maintain it's never a good thing when a team's having to make a trade out of desperation. And the Rams seem desperate to get out from under Goff's contract. Do they love Stafford just that much, maybe? Maybe. Or do they just want to get Goff out of there that much? And this works for us too. It's not a good move when you make a move at the start of the year, for instance, for Jamal Adams, because Seattle realizes they're in training camp. Oh my God, we've got nobody that can rush the passer. We need to generate some pass rush. Who's out there? Who can we go get? It's never good to make those trades in desperation because you're not going to swing necessarily a good deal, and that always works really well in your favor. And I think the Rams are doing a little bit of that here with trying to get out from under Goff. But he will be good. He will be good for them, Rocket. I agree with you there. He's going to help them improve. There's just my aspect of it is that they may improve their quarterback position a little bit. Yeah. But then they may devalue or drop down the talent of their defense. Nah. Because of the fact they can't sign guys like the Leonard Floyd, defensive back I was talking to you about. How is the rest of their cap get crunched by that $22 million cap hit on the $180 million salary cap season that we're about to head into? That's where to me that's the fly in the ointment. The rubber meets the road. Pick your metaphor. Ryan Osterson. How you doing, Ryan? I'm doing great myself. Doing awesome. And Sandy Mixes, you think the Seahawks offense will be really nice? And how much faith do you have in Penny to be the starter if Carson does not re-sign? Well, I never will be in the camp of saying that I think Rashad Penny is going to be some star in this league necessarily. But I still have held off on my final opinion on the guy, calling him a bust or calling him a bad pick, because in the flashes he's shown and utilized in the right capacity, he can be really good. And the prior offensive coordinator just did not know how to utilize him. It seemed to be a complete, so many runs up the middle with Rashad Penny just did not make any sense to me. I don't think the same offensive coordinator is going to make those same mistakes. And I think that because this offensive coordinator is going to challenge you across the board in the run game, you're going to have to go sideline to sideline as far as what you're going to have to protect in that running game. That only aids and benefits Rashad Penny in his game and his ability to stretch things outside. It's that those two stats I always go back to when you go back to Rashad Penny right before he tears his ACL a couple years ago. And that is on that year on outside runs, essentially runs just off tackle. He averaged 7 yards a carry, outside zone. On runs which were pitch plays, true outside, like to the edge type runs, he averaged 8.2 yards per carry. Those numbers still will resound in my mind and echo through, and I want to see, well, why don't we utilize that then more and see if he can sustain that? Maybe he can't stay up at 8 yards a carry, but if he's 6.5 yards a carry on outside runs, run it outside every time, And that's where I think sometimes there's been that blind spot in our offense of the last couple of years, which I'm really hoping is a part of bringing in this new guy, which he'll start to now bring in and just expand out there. That, again, I've talked about this previously. This is just standard stuff that other offenses throughout the NFL do, good, bad, other offenses, just stuff they do. It's commonplace to attack in the running game all the way left to right, not just go between your guards all day and hammer the ball up inside. I'm going to get behind the chat. I can already feel it. Arzoza, I'm kind of nervous because with Stafford on the Rams and the 49ers healthy and the Cardinals young, and having Chandler Jones back, our division became too tough. Yeah, it's going to be very tough. This was this is why one of the reasons you need to strike this year and not wait on it and try to kick the kid, another year gone. We'll get him next year, because next year's could be just, it could be hellacious. I would argue we were the toughest division in football this year. Probably were the toughest division in the football the previous year, and we will definitely be the toughest division in football next year. And this isn't even saying the 49ers are going to make a move. They're not sitting with Garoppolo. He's gone. And now I think they want to get Ryan, but there doesn't seem to be an opening by Atlanta. They don't seem to be willing to move off of Ryan. And it looks like plan B might be Cousins, but even Cousins is better than Garoppolo. Maybe not by a wide margin, but he is an improvement. It's never good when both two teams in your division at least mildly improve on teams that were already pretty good to begin with. That's danger, Will Robinson. Arizos, I'm kind of Washi. I DM'd you on Twitter. I saw that, Washi. How you doing, man? Sorry, I don't always do good with responding, but I appreciate you. Thanks for reaching out. Mirza, bro, what's your Twitter handle? Seahawks Nester, Nester. Mirza is my Twitter handle. Chase, are there any prospects in the draft that you really like? I'm just diving in, Chase, to getting full bore into the prospects in this particular draft. Last night I was looking at running backs a little bit deeper, and then I started to look at linemen. So from a lineman standpoint, I'll start with running backs. I think for me, the two running backs for me that I really, really like are Najee Harris, of course, which is like, duh, who doesn't like him? But then Javonte Williams, I very, very much like a Marshawn Lynch type running back. Very much almost all the kind of same attributes Marshawn had in his game, Javonte has. He'll most likely be there in the mid-second round area if Seattle were to want to target him and take a look at him. He's a guy who I really like there. The other running backs are, for lack of a better word, a little bit weird. Of course, Travis Etienne seems like he's going to be the guy, the top one on the board. I'd compare him to like a Clinton Portis with more speed. And I don't know if that'd be a fit here in Seattle necessarily. He'll be off the board anyway by the time we arrive, as will Najee Harris. Our only hope really is Javonte Williams on that. From the tackle standpoint, right now, when I was looking last night, I had the guy that stood out to me, and he's going to go now, I think the second tackle off the board, was I really like Rashawn Slater out of Baylor. Probably going to end up being a top 20 pick, but he's got probably the best feet in the draft as far as tackles outside of Penei Sewell, who's going to go like number 1, number 2, number 3 overall. But just a fun prospect to watch. Real precise hands, technical, great feet. Loved what I saw out of him. Samuel Cosmi, I believe he's out of Texas. Probably going to be a right tackle at the next level, but man, what a nasty finisher. Just plays to the whistle. Seahawk type lineman, old school wise, like 2013 type lineman that's just going to J.R. Sweezy you play after play after play, just grind you into dust. I really liked what I saw out of him. He's limited a little bit from a standpoint of, his skill set goes, but interesting guy. And then receiver wise, I'm the more I looked at him, the more I'm liking the Kadarius Toney kid. He's going to be a slot guy at the next level. This kid out of Florida. Really undersized receiver. The jukiest juker probably in this draft. He's the jukiest jukison. He's just a stop and start demon, kind of elements of Tavion Austin to his game. He could run all that fly sweep stuff that Seattle's going to probably start to incorporate in their offense. And if you were looking at putting a move like moving on from Lockett to save on his money and pick up a second-round pick, you could get a guy like this, and he could slot him into what Lockett does. And I don't know that this kid really misses a beat. Maybe he's not able to do some of the deep stuff that Lockett does. But everything underneath, all the crossers and all that, he'd be fine. He'd be fine with that. So there's a couple guys I definitely kind of like. I definitely like quite a bit. I think Jamar Chase might be one of my favorite overall prospects if we're just talking overall. Ahmad, thoughts on our first pick in the draft? Well, I'd like to believe that they go out and attack one of these left guards. You got the I forget his name right now, but there's the belly shirt kid there at the Senior Bowl that was a colorful personality and just owning it throughout the week. You could find a guy out there that'd be just a great little left guard that you could slot in there, man. That'd be great. The one guy that I saw was an actual left tackle, and who I think probably actually slots in, more of guard at the next level. I was trying to look and see who I had in my notes here. Certainly Elijah Vera Tucker, but he's probably going to be, again, another top 15 pick. But if for whatever reason, if he could slide, that's a guy who's been a left tackle who I think people could go, I don't see him as left tackle, more of a left guard. And so left guard slide maybe a little bit if people make that assessment on him. But man, he'd be a great left guard. He'd be able to pass block. He'd be able to do all the run blocking stuff that you want. I think he'd be really well suited there. And I think he's not going to be able to play left tackle because I think those real low benders who get around the edge really low and quick are going to just give him nightmare problems. He's a great prospect, though. But I want to see lineman, Ahmed. I think a lineman would be the first place. Left tackle, left guard. Try to target in there. If there's nobody on the board at that point, then you go down to maybe running back at that point. But it's got to be Williams in my stance. Because when you look at Gainwell, Khalil Herbert, Chuba Hubbard, I can't take those guys in the second round. To me, those guys are probably all third-round type guys, in my opinion. I'd struggle with. They've all got, to me, just a little bit of questions to them. Maybe Gainwell's a guy I can maybe get sold on in the second round, but I don't know. The Rockets, Stafford left the Lions probably for the best his rookie year. My dad would mock his play, but he looks a bit more mellow than even Russell ever was. Yeah, Stafford's got upside left here. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. This move does have a boom potential to it as well. This is not just, oh, well, he'll be 15% better than Goff. Write it down. That's it. No, he might be 50% better than Goff. You know, you might see a guy who's got another 4,500 yard year in that arm. You know, maybe not a lot of them, but he may have one more. And like, look, you play for the Lions, you play on these loser teams for years. It gets into your mentality, it gets into your heart, it gets into your soul. It wears you down. We saw this with Carlos Dunlap, right? He's been playing for the Bengals for 9-10 years. He comes over to Seattle, he looks re-energized, a whole new player. You know, it looked like a bargain for us getting him in the 7th round, even paying the $10 million we're going to have to pay on him. You know, $14 million he's going to cost. So that potential is there, and it's something that you see more and more of throughout the league. We saw this the Steelers move last year. Minka Fitzpatrick looks like a bust with the Miami Dolphins. They can't find a role for him. They keep moving him, slotting him into a spot. Comes over the Steelers, they give him a role, give him a defined, here's what you're doing, A, B, C, D, E. He takes off through the roof. Looks like a new player at a different organization. That part's got to be considered here. And people laugh at Stafford, and I joke with the Padford stuff, but the guy's been like the Cal Ripken Jr. of quarterbacks as far as just putting up the 4,000-yard seasons and just being consistent year in, year out. And he's a gamer, and he can spin it. Throws one of the best balls in the league, man. Washi, what do you think about signing Joe Thuney and signing Ethan Posick on a 1-year prove-it deal and then drafting a talented left tackle? I like all those moves, Washi. You know, when it comes to left guard role, you don't have a lot of options out there at left guard. I know a lot of people are really getting on this bandwagon of Brandon Scherff. The Washington football team's multiple Pro Bowl right guard. I go back to this again and again, though. The real key to the reason that deal does not make sense for Seattle and why I do not see Seattle making that move is because there is a difference between the right guard and left guard, like there is a difference between the left tackle and right tackle. It's a different skill set. It just is. Right tackles tend to be your Frankenstein bludgeoners, right? Brendan Giacomini types. Left tackles are your dancing bears. Well, think of that on a more minor level with the guards. And so Thuney is a left guard who can operate well at the left guard position. He knows what he's doing with that. My cat fell off the chair. He's having a nightmare, I guess. But Scherff, if you move him into right guard, having him starting there, now you're taking a guy in Damian Lewis who shows all the potential in the world off of his first year, almost a sub-Pro Bowl level year in his first year, and you're going to bounce him over to left guard, which he's going to struggle mightily. Because what is Damian Lewis's biggest hole in his game? Pass blocking. He's a nasty road grading run blocker, but he can't really pass protect all that well out the gate here. Maybe it'll come along, not all that well right now. Okay, so you're going to take him from the right guard position where he's protected in those pass protection struggles, and now you're going to put him onto that island on the left side where he's got Aaron Donald playing and play out one-on-one, because it's the right guard who gets the help from the center more often than not the left guard. This is why I would come to a guy like Thuney as being at least a logical. I don't know if he's a fit here. I don't know if all that stuff as far as the linemen they're looking for now. They're looking for more mobile guys maybe as far as linemen go. I don't know enough about Thuney to know if he'll necessarily fit into that part of what they're looking for. But as far as being a competent upgrade at left guard than what we've seen, yes, he would be that. And I wouldn't argue with the move at all. Mindy V says hi from Virginia. How you doing, Mindy V? Insidious, what's up, brother? What's up, Insidious? How you doing? Mears, Rams are set to build a juggernaut team. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that's the case. This definitely improves them, but again, they're going to lose key contributors to even this year's team because they can't afford to sign them now, taking that $22 million dead money hit. They can do the acrobatics through here. They can make some moves, make a few moves, mill here, a mill there, but you're not gonna get out from under that hit completely, and you're gonna feel a little bit of that pain one way or another. And they didn't have a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal anymore. They got expensive quarterbacks coming in. I think they're going to end up probably paying nearly $45 million to the quarterback position just this year. Again, on a $180 million cap, we're getting to almost talking about nearly a third, a little obviously less than a third, but It's getting tight. It's going to get tight for the Rams. Watch the moves. Let's watch the moves they make over this offseason to see how they navigate this before we quite give them the juggernaut title. And Jose says, at least the 49ers didn't get him. And that's, of course, didn't get Stafford. And Jose, you're absolutely right. That would have been much worse. That would have been much, much worse because Shanahan's great offense right now, I think, is being held back a little bit by the quarterback play. And I think that they would have been elevated considerably by that. They've been a team offensively in the past game that can only attack basically on 15 yards and in routes and on the inside of the field. Teams have learned to just basically ignore them on the outside. Now you're bringing in a quarterback who can do all of the throws in the middle and get over the top on the edges. That would make them so hard to defend with what they can do in the running game. So it does play out better for us that it is the Rams and not the Niners, because the Niners are going to be right there too, man. They got that, number 12 overall pick or something like that in this next draft, somewhere in that realm. They're gonna be making some moves. Washi, I'm glad we got Shane Waldron because Goff gets 5 to 10 yard completions handed to him on a silver platter. That will be good for us so the offense can get into rhythm, and then we can take the deep shots. Yeah, that's specifically one of about, if there's top 5 things that this offensive coordinator brings in, that's going to be one of those top 5 things, Washi, that he is bringing to bear, which is an ability to bring easy completions back into this offense. No more or less often, should I say, are we seeing Russell back there patting on the ball, looking around, patting on the ball. A lot more of this will be scripted. Here's where you're going with the ball prior to the snap. I've already set all this stuff up in the running game. Don't worry about it. It's going to be wide open. Just trust me, Russ. You sure it's going to be wide open? I mean, it's not been wide open before when I've done that. Yeah, because you guys haven't set people up before. I'm setting people up now. They think it's going to go this way. You're going to have them wide open on the backside. So just right off the snap, look, throw, get it out of your hand. Wow. You can play quarterback like that? Yeah, Russ. Yeah, you can. I think it'll be a little bit of that. So I agree. Ted Brogan. Hey. How you doing, Ted? He says, I love the stat Padford. I think Motown. Yeah, dude. It's got a very Motown name to it, doesn't it? Mirza says, hi from Toronto, Canada. Oh, hell yeah. Got him in from Virginia to Toronto, Canada. We're going worldwide with the Hawks Nest here. Worldwide. Oh, Ted, thank you for the $5 donation. I missed your dono, but I will not miss it now, my sir. Thank you so much. He says, I love your stat, Padford. I think Motown Matt is better than the Cutlers of the world, but he's got something to prove. Top 15 quarterback and with a top 5 arm. Agreed. And I butchered what you said there. So he said, I think Motown Matt is better than the Cutlers of the world, but he's got something to prove. He's a top 15 quarterback with a top 5 arm. And that's absolutely right. And that's why I try to also say, Ted, I think he is a really like a mirror image in a lot of respects to what Carson Palmer was. Not the most overly mobile guys, but they can move around a little bit. They spin it and throw it beautifully, can make every throw in the book. Been in kind of losery organizations for a long time. Now they get to go to somewhere else. And I'm going to count on that he is going to take off a little bit, Ted. I think he's going to feel a little bloom here, man. I think he is. How can he not? You know, and I think that there's a little bit also to the fact of him being, is he a winner? Is he a guy that is that type, or is he what he is and has been throughout his career? If there is one quarterback you would give the benefit of the doubt to, it would be a quarterback who's been with the Lions for 12, 13 odd years. That might be the one guy, because it wasn't like they were bad once he arrived. It was like they were piss poor for 25 odd years, 30 odd years, 40 odd years before that. Mirza says, I think we should bring Lynch back. I'm open. You know, Mirza, I'm open on that train. If you're saying all aboard on that train, I'm jumping right on. I'm running up the tracks as it's already starting to move down the tracks, hopping on, Buster Keaton style, just holding on by my arms. Washi says Les Snead is a great general manager. He is a very good general manager. I love Washi. I love the general managers who will go for it, who aren't worried about, what about not having first round picks? Well, what are you going to do about your salary cap? Well, what happens when this happens? Well, what happens when, why not go for it from time to time? The NFL is so competitive and so closely aligned to each other. It's so hard to get those couple of edges above the next guy next to you, especially in a division like ours. So if you find a way to do it, do it. Take advantage. Let loose. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm not the guy who loses my job when we're $50 million under the cap and we have no draft picks, and I'm the guy over here going like, what happened to all the cap space? We have the draft picks, man. Gosh, who told you to do that? But I like what he does there, and man, they draft really well. They might be in this division the best drafters in this division, the Rams right now, at least over the last couple of years. Shawshank, how you doing, Shawshank? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome on in. Washi says, I think Mickey Loomis is the best general manager in the NFL. What are your thoughts? Well, if there's a number one where if I'm putting him up there with Schneid, he's definitely right up there. Mickey Loomis is. Of course, he's been doing this for 10 years, and that's the only reason that the Saints finally got to the $95 million negative point this year, is that he has been just so creative in kicking the can down the road, and this is with Drew Brees wanting to be up to the top of the top every single time that he wants to get his payday, a la like Russ does a little bit. And that he's had to really do those acrobatics to get himself under the cap, but he still has kept that team stacked. They've still made some really nice moves to get aggressive when they need to. Again, another general manager like Schneid who's always moving downhill, always going forward, not worrying about what could have been. And Loomis also is a former Seahawks general manager. He was here for a while, and if I remember correctly, Washi, he made some pretty doggone good moves when he was here. I think he was a pretty solid general manager for us. I want to say that what got caught up with him leaving before was I think Holmgren came aboard, and Loomis was, Holmgren was going to be the de facto general manager, so Loomis, I think, had to move on or something like that. I want to say it was something like that, but he had some really good drafts. He did. Spencer Smith says, shh, I'm in the break room, tuned in, laughing my ass off. I'll try to be a little quieter, Spencer. Thanks for tuning in on the break room, buddy. Ahmad, thoughts on the first pick in the draft? On our first pick in the draft. Ahmad, I would... I think it's going to be either order of importance to me is I think they look left guard, left tackle, and then running back. That would be the three. I haven't looked at the cornerback draft quite yet as deep as I wanted. I gave them a once-over pass, if you will. And they're okay. Nobody that was like sensational. But there's a couple guys that could fit into our scheme. A few more zone guys, I think, this year than last year. There's so few last year that fit in the scheme. But that would be maybe those four places I would target. I think I answered to you above there, Ahmad. Washi, I think you should make it 90 seconds for the slow mode. How do you think Bud Dupree would do in a 4-3 scheme? Don't think he would do well, Washi. I think he's a guy you stand up. It's rare. It's very rare a guy's going to be able to put his hand down or stand up and do both equally well. You're going to lose a little bit usually when you have a guy put his hand in the dirt. I do think that. I think 3-4 outside linebacker, especially when they've been doing that for years standing up, hard to get them out of that mold of things. And I think a 3-4 team is going to break the bank for him, Washi. I think he's not going to look at one. Why should he change schemes if he's got another team out there willing to pay him that he fits perfectly into the scheme of? I would expect more of that. And I'll consider doing the slow mode on 90 seconds for sure, man. I think we'll be okay today. Dark RH, bro, we're really about to make the Super Bowl again. Yeah, I bet you're feeling yourself, Dark RH. I bet you are. I saw your comment in the comment section. I just didn't respond. It's a good move. Solid move by your club, man. But boy, you're going to have to lose a couple players to make that move work. You didn't just take that dead money hit for nothing. Master Chief, what's up? What's up? Lions won this trade. I do lean in the direction of thinking they're going to win this trade eventually, Master Chief. It's going to all be determined by where those first-round picks land. And we just saw this last year. The Texans traded away one of their first-round picks that I think has ended up as the number 3 overall pick. And they were certain at that time, I'm sure when they let that pick go, that was not going to be the number 3 overall pick in the draft. This can happen again, and especially when you're the Rams and it's going to be 7 straight years of not trading away first-round picks. Sooner or later, you could find yourself having given up some great draft capital that you didn't really want to give up. And I think that's where it's going to really be proved out, Master Chief. If one of these picks ends up as a top 10, the Rams win the trade at that point. You got one top 10 pick for Matt Stafford, you win the trade. You got a top 10 pick and a first rounder, and you got the third rounder, and you got Jared Goff, who you can use as whatever you want to use, flip him for another trade, or let him play out the year at the quarterback position for you to see what you might have in him. I can easily see them coming out on top on this one, but I know why Dark RH feels pretty good too. TJ, how you doing, TJ? What's up, man? Arzos, do you see a bigger role being played by Jordan Brooks? Since it looks like KJ is gone, do you see Bruce Irvin playing with us next year? Yeah, I could. I don't, because I don't see Jordan Brooks being able to play the Sam linebacker role as those. I don't want him off the ball. I don't want him off a tight end on ball. I want him off ball at the will, or at middle linebacker, where he can move around in space and utilize that speed and quickness that he has. But I do see him, as we saw this last year, him slide into that will spot. I think the thing you're pointing to is what you would see is early downs with the Seahawks throughout the back end of the schedule. They would have KJ Wright at the Sam filling in for Bruce, and they would flip him to Will on passing downs and then take Jordan Brooks off the field. The one key to that move, though, is that if Jordan Brooks is going to stay on the field in those passing downs, he's got to do a lot better in coverage. He got targeted a little bit this year. People knew he had some worries and concerns there. So we think he was 97th rated by Pro Football Focus in coverage. It's not a good coverage grade. So he's got to get a little bit better on that. That's going to need to get improved. And if he's going to be out the will, you're out there on an island at the will. You're going to have to cover tight ends sometimes up the field. You're going to have to be strong in zone. You know, you got to get around those flood concepts that the Rams like to run. You know, and we'll see. That's the part that I would put a big fat we'll see. The thing I always come back to with him as a player is his best position really is going to be middle linebacker at the end of the day. And absolutely, I'd look to bring Irvin back because not only can you potentially get a rotational pass rusher, but you can get a guy who can play that Sam linebacker role, which now we need somebody to play that because Cody Barton can't play it. Ben Burke-Irvin's not big enough. It leaves a little bit of a hole there that needs to be filled at that point. TJ Wilborn says, will you be live for the draft? I'll be live for all 3 days of the draft, TJ, because that's how I roll. I'm just cool like that. No, it's always fun, man. You know the draft's always that big to do it, TJ. So I gotta do the draft, man. Gotta do it. I will be live for the draft. Absolutely. We'll be live for the draft. We'll be live on the day of free agency. All that good stuff. Enrique, how you doing, Enrique? We should trade Lockett for a second rounder. Don't know if the Seahawks are willing to do it, though. I think the Seahawks will be willing to do it. I think that there was already a little bit of potential that this move was going to be made prior to the offensive coordinator you bringing in. That it was on deck. It was coming down the pike. And the reason being is that not because Lockett's a bad player, not because Lockett isn't one of the better slot receivers in the league, but because you're going to be paying DK Metcalf a year from now, and Lockett's due an extension. So something had to kind of give in that situation anyway. Now you bring in a guy in Waldron, and the real key to understand in Waldron what he's going to probably bring to bear here is what you saw with the Rams offense, which their wide receivers don't play. You know, those are some junkyard dogs they got over there at wide receiver. Those guys will block. They will block a defensive end. They will run like a running back if they're asked to on jet sweeps. They are asked to do everything as a wide receiver, not just, well, here's your one little roll and go run your little cutesy route. And if you go watch a recent top billing video that he just did on this in regards to some of this stuff, you can see that this is where he mentions it, and I would echo it, that there is some worry and concern here when you look at Tyler Lockett being able to run some of that stuff. Is he big enough to run those jet sweeps consistently and take that punishment? Can you ever going to put Lockett down on a defensive end and try to block him, have him do a reach block down on a defensive end? Probably not going to work, but that's built into this offense. For the running game to work kind of in the right capacity and way, you're trying to cheat and get extra men a lot in what they're trying to do. And you do that by, rather than having my right tackle, for instance, have to take this defensive end, I just bring the receiver down to down block him on the reach block, and then I bring everybody left, right? Everybody shoots left. So now my right tackle goes on to the defensive tackle, right? Take him on. Then my guard goes back down to the other defensive tackle. Then by that point, you're hoping your center's at the next level, and you guys can see where I'm going with this. But you need the receiver who can block. Again, you can create cap space. You need that right now. You can create draft capital. You need that right now. And you may need a third receiver that fits a little bit, or a second receiver that fits a little bit differently into this next new offense that we're about to install that Lockett doesn't exactly quite fit into necessarily. Evergreen, Splish Splash. He was taking a bath. All about a Saturday night. Woohoo. Team 12s. How you doing, Team 12s? What's up? How you doing? The Food Gamer, Dalen Hayes, says he wants to come to Seattle. Really good edge rusher and can be a linebacker. He is versatile and will be a good pickup for us. Your thoughts? My thoughts are I have not gotten much to the defensive side of the ball yet, Food Gamer. I'm just concentrating a little bit on the offensive side of the ball because I'm anticipating Seattle goes a little bit more to the offensive side of the ball in certain respects in this particular draft. But you know what? I love me some suggestions. Dalen Hayes. And I will add him to the top of my list. I did have a guy, somebody asked me to look up on receivers that we'll get to and talk about that I was looking at last night. Really liked him. Another fun receiver in this draft that Seattle might look at. Ilmir Smith Marset. I think somebody was asking me to take a look at him last time. Really liked him. Great talent. Again, another guy that just looks a lot like, to me, a Steelers receiver. Like he's a guy that I just could see the Steelers targeting. He reminds me of a guy they had there a couple years ago who kept getting suspended off and on. He's very similar in the way that he runs his routes and stuff, but polished ball skills, hands. He can do some kick returning for them. I like that guy a lot. Somebody mentioned that in the last one. So Food Gamer, I'll add Dalen Hayes is added my list. I will dive into the tape on him and take a look. We certainly, I think, are going to be a little hesitant with finding pass rushers necessarily in this draft. My reasoning being is that I think Seattle's going to feel pretty good about their young pass rushers. You have L.J. Collier. You got Darrell Taylor. You got Alton Robinson. You got Rasheem Green. And all these guys are in varying stages and levels of their development at this point. And you really only need one or two of those guys to pop. And I'd argue that rather than bringing another young guy into addition into that the better route to probably go is to look for the more tried and true pass rusher out there in free agency, especially when you consider there's so many pass rushers that are going to be available in this free agent class. I mean, there is going to be maybe the deepest pass rushing free agent class that we've ever seen, especially when you consider all the guys that are going to be released because of the salary cap. The salary cap, executions that are going to happen because teams are trying to get under the salary cap. So I'll take a look at him, but I would be very surprised to see Seattle take a pass rusher in this draft. They took 2 in last year's draft. You've drafted Rasheem Green, L.J. Collier in the previous 2 drafts before that, and they still, I think, like those guys. Unless they're just totally out on a couple of those guys at this point, and they say, we're done. He's out, which I don't think they will be. Birds of Prey says Seahawks will either get bounced out of the first round of the playoffs again or miss the playoffs entirely this upcoming season. It's a bold prediction, Bird of Prey. Bold prediction. I think I'm going to reserve judgment as to what my predictions are for the upcoming season, seeing what they do in the offseason. I will say one thing. It was a step in the right direction for them to move on from Schottenheimer. Strictly that fact alone is a step in the right direction. If they can add some other steps here onto it, I think they can put themselves back into a position to really, truly contend for the Super Bowl. But it's going to be based on them killing it this offseason. They can't sort of wishy-wash their way through it. They can't get half the moves right and half the moves wrong, which was kind of what you saw last offseason. They're going to have to kind of kill it this offseason. As tough as this division's going to get, knowing some of the things that the holes that they've got to replace and fill with the limitations they have as far as their budget, as far as their draft capital goes, they're up against it a little bit. Last year it was a lot easier with knowing what you had for cap and draft picks, knowing what you had in $50 million in cap space. It's going to be tougher to do it this year. But if they kill it, they can pull it off. Dennis Enrique, why would you trade Lockett for Darrell Taylor? I think, Dennis, the key on this one, Dennis, is I wouldn't look at it like trading Tyler Lockett for Darrell Taylor. It'd be more like you're trading Tyler Lockett for a Kadarius Toney. You're now moving in a slot guy that's now 1/13 the cost of what Tyler Lockett's going to cost you, and maybe he gives you 90% of Tyler Lockett's production. Is that a worthwhile trade-off? And the reason being, again, for those folks that want to keep Lockett, you've got to consider he's due for a contract extension. It's Seahawks front office MO. If they've got a player who's outperformed his contractors, performed up to what they would hope he would, and then he comes into the last year of that deal, they're going to use the last year of that deal to forward him on into a new contract, historically speaking. So that one of those two decisions has to be kind of made there. And you can't just sort of sit on him in the final year of the deal and then have him go away in free agency because Seattle tends to try to do more right by the player than that historically. You could do it, but they just, they don't tend to do that. Randall, how you doing, Randall? Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you. Got dogs in here. Andrew Royce. Trade KJ Wright for draft capital? ? I know he had a career year, but we could use the draft capital to go for O-line and D-line. Well, I love where your mind's at, Andrew. I certainly do. But the problem being is KJ Wright is a free agent. He is not under contract with us anymore. So he is free to go where he may. And you can't trade free agents, unfortunately. But I like where your head's at. Birds of Prey, it's Washi. I just think the Saints are the best run organization. One of the best runs organizations. I mean, they certainly are. I can see why you'd say that, Washi. I mean, from the general manager down to the coach, they've got a great structure, great relationship. And again, they seem to be able to bring on guys. I like the fact they always seem to be kicking tires on guys too, like Seattle does. I like that about Seattle as well. You're in on every deal, but you don't necessarily pull the trigger. Just kind of got your ear to the floor, listen to the next room. And you might go into that next room. You just want to make sure there's some good in there. Let's make sure that way. I like that. And being in on any deal, and they're like that. They're in on everything. It's going to be tough for them. The one tough thing is they're really going to get hit right in the cojones this offseason, being that they're $95 million over the cap as we stand right now. That's gonna hurt. There's some things they can do to get out from under it. They can move this, move that. Breeze retired, all that good stuff. But unfortunately, it's going to slam him a bit this offseason. Chase Stern, how do you think we should address the salary cap? Well, the first move that I pointed to right out the gate, Chase Stern, is to say, okay, you move on from Tyler Lockett. That's $10 million in savings right out the gate. I think that would help you out quite a bit. I think you could structure a Jamal Adams contract in order to take down the cap hit lower than the $10 million. We saw just a couple of years ago that Frank Clark signed a $23.5 million deal. Yet, the first year of that cap hit was $6.5 million, which allowed them to add an extra talent. Why couldn't you do the same with a Jamal Adams on a $16 million deal? So I think they could lower down the first year debt, which would lower his $10 million hit down to, let's say, if you can lower down to $7 million on a contract extension. Now you've created roughly $13 million just between those two players. If you really wanted to, you could move on from Quandre Diggs. There's another $5 million in savings. Now we're up into $18 million. Now we're cooking with gas now, aren't we? So $18 million right there just on those three moves alone if you wanted to make them, I would think. We will see. We'll see what they do with it, but there's ways to create cap space here. There's some other stuff you could do. You could restructure Carlos Dunlap, multi-year him, lower down his first year hit here. We're not as up against the cap as people would lend you to believe. Some contracts came into play with people getting performance bonuses like Dickinson and Trey Flowers, but just understand there's still room here that we have. We're not one of the teams with the most cap space, but we've got enough room we can make with certain deals we want to make. We can maybe make one real nice big move if we wanted to, really. But that's all dependent, again, too, on them being willing to go for it this year. And I'm hugely behind the cap, so I'm behind the chat. So let me get a little faster here. The players we should trade are Diggs to the Cowboys for a third and Lockett to the Jets for a second. And to replace them, we should draft Tutu Atwell, and we should move Blair to safety and then keep Ugo. What do you think? Ugo's going to stay because he's on his rookie deal, so you just keep him no matter what, Team 12s. And Blair, I'm fine with moving him to free safety. I'd love to see him at free safety. I'd love the thought of having two big hitters back there, real big hitters in Diggs and Blair back there. I don't think you're getting a third rounder from the Cowboys. I don't think you're getting more than a fifth rounder back for Diggs in any kind of trade that you might make for him. But I'm still okay at that point doing it because I think this year in clearing $5 million of cap space is like in any other previous recent off seasons would be like clearing $10 million in cap space for the amount of players that are going to be available out on the market. I want to take advantage of that open market because there's going to be guys that you can buy pennies on the dollar, because so many teams will be releasing to get underneath the cap. So few teams will have any extra cap space to sign those released players that are on the open market. And if you've got that extra cap space to come in there and swoop them up, you're going to get you could get a handful of guys, handful of really cheap guys. Marvin Dumas, how you doing, Marvin? He says, can we get Floyd from the Rams to add to Carlos Dunlap? He is, I believe, a free agent, Marvin. And they're not going to be able to hold on to him there. He's not signing a contract extension. I really like him as a player. Solid pass rusher. I like him more than Dante Fowler a couple of years ago and watching both of them play for the Rams. I thought he was more impactful for the Rams than Fowler was. And he's just the type of guy I'm talking about here. Going to get one of those competent pass rushers that are out on the free agent market. There's so many of them out there. I mean, just a laundry list. Let me just hit up a couple of the guys right off the top here that Leonard Williams, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, Ryan Kerrigan, Ndamukong Suh, Everson Griffin, Autry from the Colts, Romeo Akawara from the Detroit Lions, Sheldon Rankins, Kerry Hyder from the 49ers, Carl Lawson, Corey Peters, Bud Dupree, Melvin Ingram, Matt Judon, Von Miller, Shaq Barrett. I mean, my goodness, this is a list of free agents that are due to be free agents that aren't even the guys that are the cap casualty guys. That's just the list of guys that are just going to be on the market. Now, granted, Leonard Williams is going to get franchised and maybe one or two of those other guys, but because the cap's lowered, it's going to be hard to franchise tag guys this year. You're just going to have to let them go to the market because you can't. That cap hit's pretty substantial if you're going to franchise somebody. It doesn't really matter what position we're talking about. In Food Game Where I will look at that Dalen Hayes. Randall says, I heard McVay called and told Goff he was traded through the headset. Good one, Randall. John C., I love how we traded for Steven Sullivan and then tried to make him a defensive end, but now he is on Carolina as a wide receiver. Yeah, John, a little frustrating. A little frustrating to say the least sometimes with the moves that they make. What was the plan here? I mean, you understood when you drafted him, you weren't going to be able to bring him in as an undrafted free agent. He'd probably go somewhere south at that point, i.e. a Carolina-type team. Who knows? Maybe there's more to the story on this one. Maybe you didn't want to be here. Maybe you didn't like being up this far. This is far from home, and he was homesick and wanted to go play in the South. It'd be interesting to see how far his career really goes, John. I would probably hazard to guess as to say the front office doesn't believe that Stephen Sullivan's ever going to be a competent wide receiver or tight end in this league. Dark RH says McVay is a far better coach than Shanahan. Tell me otherwise, and I'll give you a valid reason. I don't know if there's a far better coach between either of them. They're both upper level coaches in the NFL. You could make the argument Dark RH with our 1-2 right now. Certainly top 4 at the very least. So we're really getting down pretty far at how we're parsing, right? We're taking a razor blade to the difference in what we find with it. I would tend to think that if you had Sean McVay with the 49ers over the last couple of years, I don't think he gets as much out of them in wins and losses versus what Shanahan's been able to get out. He's not had a dynamic, really awesome, wide receiver necessarily on the outside. He's had some good guys, some kind of gimmicky guys. He's had a quarterback with some limitations, to say the least. And while Goff has some limitations as well, I think Goff is a better player, a far better player than Garoppolo is. So those would be where I stand on it. Philip Wiseman just watched a breakdown of Rams offense. So interesting how many plays they run off the same formation. Hope all is good, brother. Philip, all is gravy right now. Absolutely. And yeah, it's the keystone to what they do. And I think it's nice to do it this way because you can really mess with teams because they don't know what's coming. And you get a lot of what we've seen in our offense recently is that teams know what's coming. That bubble screen to the Rams at the end, they got picked off. That's because they knew it was coming because you were very predictable in what you showed on film. But now they'll be more into the nuances of players making everything look the same play after play after play. And I think there's an innovation in that. Because when you have a wide, big, thick book of plays, we do this and we run this kind of play, we run that. Sometimes it's hard to run all those really good. You don't have a lot of practice time anymore in the NFL. Everything's been really truncated and reduced, and certainly the demic situations caused everything to get even further reduced. I'm sure we'll probably see our normal offseason camps to a degree this offseason, but some of it could be further impacted. We may see more of it cut off. And so having set things you do really well and being excellent at those things, I think that there's a little bit of a brilliance in that. But that will be the difference in what we see now, is they will run those different type of things. And he can run different stuff because of the fact the Rams changed over his time there. They went from that 11 personnel, which was the 3 wide receivers, and that 1 wide receiver always coming back across the formation, and that was really their bread and butter in getting to the Super Bowl. And then teams solved that and figured it out, and then they go to the 12 personnel. And then they just start hammering that with the play action stuff. So he's got a different ways of doing it. You could see things differently, but he could show you the same play 4 times in a row and run 3 different options out of it. And then you start getting into advanced stuff because if you get a guy like Russell who's been in this game for 10 years now, you can have him start doing stuff on the fly a little bit more and giving him a little bit maybe more control on the fly and what you're doing with those options. And it's easier to change to those options because this is just what we always run. Arzos, hi from New York. Azos, thank you for checking me out from New York, man. I hope you're staying warm over there. Look like you guys got hit by a blizzard. Washi says, I like Shane Waldron because playing on script will be great for us and will bring a dink and dunk aspect to the offense that you got cut off there a little bit. Yeah, he's going to provide stuff that Russell's not had up until this point. And this was an interesting story. I don't know if you guys heard this that broke out last week, and I was not aware of it at all. But that was that when Schottenheimer came aboard here, the agreement was that Seattle was going to keep 60 to 80% of the offense that they already had in place, which is really an interesting thing to hear from a new offensive coordinator coming in. I did not know that, and it's shocking, frankly. This guy, I would not expect them to have played that same kind of game here. They'll do things that Russell does well. All that stuff will still be mixed in, I'm sure, but they're going to be implementing, it's going to inverse with this guy. If you're taking 60, 80% before, now you're getting 60, 80% of this playbook. I don't see why you would have made this move if you didn't do that, but how weird of them to bring in an offensive coordinator, very Carroll-like. Okay, you're coming in, you're being hired to run the show, but you're going to keep this playbook that you had nothing to do with, and now you need to work your way around it. Especially for a guy in Shoddy who, say what you will about his stale offense is his offense. It's what he wanted to run. That was an oddity for me. Bond. James Bond. How you doing, James Bond? What do you think about us drafting Dalen Hayes? He wants to come here. Somebody else was just mentioning that, James. I am going to look him up tonight. So he's on my list tonight. I will get back to you on Sunday on the Super Bowl postgame with an update on what I think on Dalen Hayes. I do just go back to, again, James, we got 4 young pass rushers, man. Do we really think they're going to go draft another 5th when they're definitely probably going to keep, most likely, those 4 guys? Or are they going to want to go for another veteran addition to kind of book in with Dunlap? That would be my one thing that I would wonder with that. Maxwell Stern, do you think the new OC can bring out Russell's full potential and capitalize on his prime? Yeah, for the fact that I think he's going to take him into places Russell's never been. He's going to go into waters he's never sailed through. It's going to make him a little uncomfortable at first, but I think he gets the other side of it, and it's going to make him a better player. Being on time, being on script, more for Russell will help him. It's not a thing where a short quarterback can't play on time. Steve Young was a wild quarterback coming out of BYU. Mike Holmgren got his hooks into him with San Francisco 49ers and settled that wild pony down. Got that Mustang bridled, okay, and brought him back in and got him under control and got him to trust the offense. And Young used to talk about how he would drop back and he wouldn't wait for a passing lane. You can still find the soundbite somewhere on YouTube. But he would not drop back and look for a passing lane. He would throw to a spot and trust his receiver to get to that spot. And before you go, well, that's scary. That's it. Young was, I think, when he retired at the time, maybe the highest rated passer before Aaron Rodgers came along, the highest rated passer in the NFL history. So he was able to be pretty proficient at doing it that way. But it was having a coach in Mike Holmgren over the top of him saying, Steve, I know you can't see this, but our receivers run the routes precisely. I literally tell our receivers how to count the steps in their routes. They're going to be on that spot. Trust him to be on that spot. Trust him to be on time. And Steve became an MVP off trusting that. And I would argue Steve had probably some of the very same limitations of looking over the lineman that Russell does. But he could still play on time and then still utilize all that scramble stuff. But the on-time stuff will make the scramble stuff that much more difficult because you can just punch and counterpunch people all day long. Maxwell Stern says Rams lost this trade in the long run. Well put, Maxwell. Well put. Nathaniel Park says, is the cap going down to $180 million for sure? I heard it might only go down to $190 million. Does that change anything? It doesn't, I think, change a whole lot, Nathaniel. One of the key points on this with this cap is that for the last 10 years, you've seen a 10% increase every single year. Now you're having a year where not only are you not getting the 10%, but even if we're on the low end of $90 million, you're losing the at least 8% of the cap at that point in addition to it. That's still going to sting the butt cheeks. And there's a couple teams out there that have been going for it over the last couple of years and sort of the moment of Armageddon is coming down for them, and the skies will darken and it's going to get dark. You know, Saints, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're going to have to finally pay the piper. But it'll help a little bit, Nathaniel, a little bit. But when you look at it, you know, you've got Falcons, $25 million over the cap. The Steelers are $20 million over the cap. Packer, $20 million over the cap, 17. Even if you lower that down, these teams are still just barely now with a little bit of plus cap space. They're still going to be having to tighten it down. It's hard for me to see the NFL agreeing to go to the 190. It's hard for me to see the ownership agreeing to do that. They want to get this hit off the books, and the reason being is that they don't know what future hits are coming in. This is not a fixed cost of loss at this point, meaning that, okay, we lost 30% of our gate revenue last year. We're good. We're good. Let the money roll in. Fans back in the stadium, and we'll have all the merchandising and all the good stuff will just be full meal deal now. We don't know that. We might not have fans again next season. So they're going to want to try to get that cap to hit as much as they can hit this year. And I think they want to go even below the 170. They initially just agreed to the 170. And now we're hearing maybe the 180. But I would be a little surprised with the 190 just for that aspect of this not being, this cost could still bite them in the butt. And that's what we reportedly heard is they lost 30% of the NFL's revenue by not having the fans in the stadium this year. You got to make up that money. They didn't make up the money in ratings like everybody said they was going to do. That didn't go that route. So they're going to have to do something in regards to that. Paul Manning, what things do the Seahawks need to do to get back to the Super Bowl? And welcome on to the chat, Paul. Well, I think it's a multiple step process. I really do at this point. There's not just one magical arrow that you're going to fire from your quiver and it's going to solve everything. It starts with a step by step. The first step of the process was getting Schottenheimer out of here and bringing somebody in who could install a modern NFL offense, who can bring all the wrinkles at play that need to be wrinkled, all the things that we didn't have before, disguising things pre-snap, being a little more complex in how we do things. Just multifaceted, all the things, again, just that are standardized modern offenses throughout the league. 25 of the 32 NFL offenses run this stuff, or at least have parts of this with their offense that we just had as glaring holes. That's why you had to back into the season that your offense couldn't do anything, because they had no counter. They had no second option to go to, no second wind. So the first thing, that step as a starting place, Paul, was pretty big. It's no low-key step, because that's going to do a few different things. Not only does it modernize your offense, but it takes Russell Wilson and forces him to elevate his game. He now doesn't get to hold on to that 60 to 80% of his offense like they did before, and he just gets to do the same stuff he's been doing since he got in through the door. No. You're going to have to learn some new now. You're going to have to play a little bit more on script, on time. So it's a big slice of this pie, Paul. It is a big slice of this pie. The other aspects of what they need to do, Paul, is I do think that they need to move. I've said you're going to need to clear some cap space to take advantage of, I think, this bull market that's going to be out there as far as the free agents go. So you're going to have to make some tough trades, I think, to do that. Part with guys that are good players, solid players. But you've got to recap some of that draft capital. You're sitting with either between 3 or 4 picks right now. There's some uncertainty about the preseason trade of Nickerson, the cornerback we got from the Jets, and whether or not that's going to count or not. But you may only have 3 draft picks right now. And you're sitting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 17th amount most of cap space as we stand right now. So create some cap space, trade a guy, get some more draft capital back. And then as far as what I would target is I would go offensive line. I would get another bookend pass rusher, be it even a veteran guy that's maybe a little long in the tooth, but just got a little bit of that one more good year left kind of guy. Bring him back on in here. I'd probably bring in a Bruce Irvin on a cheap 1-year deal to serve the Sam linebacker. And then I'd look at offensive line. I would really try to hit the offensive line, specifically finding my left tackle of the future and an upper level starting left guard, a lot like you did with finding Damian Lewis and targeting him in the 3rd round. He was the guy on draft day that I stood up on the table for and said, this is the one pick. If you hate the rest of this draft, you don't like the rest of this draft, this is the one pick you can feel really good about, because you just got a 10-year starter in this league at this point. A position that has been an absolute hole for us, a black hole for us. We now fill in with somebody who's going to be potentially even kind of rubbing up into that Pro Bowl level of things. I think that would be huge to get another Damian Lewis there at left guard this offseason. So I know people want to get on the corner train. Certainly bringing a corner in would be nice as well. I'm more on stacking up the lines at this point. That's where I gravitate towards, Paul. I really do gravitate towards that. I think you can get cheap receivers in different places. I think you can get running backs in different places. I think cornerbacks, zone corners, you can find that in different spots. I think the other places you've got to put a little bit more of an onus on it. It's going to be a little harder to find the good left guard, a little harder to find the left tackle of the future. So you've got to make it a priority. In Food Gamer, I will look at Dalen Hayes, I promise. TJ, on 3rd and short, put Brooks at middle linebacker, Griffin and Adams at OLB and blitz them all. Madden defense. I love it, man. Team 12s, I watch Chat Sports and they say live stream the draft, but when the Hawks are about to be up, I instantly switch to your channel. I appreciate that, Team 12s. Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Nathaniel Parks, Metcalf discount? Not likely. I would say it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $23 to $25 million a year. And that's where you can't sign Lockett, because Lockett's going to cost you about $13 million a year on a contract extension right now. So can you afford to pay $37, $38 million to the wide receiver core when you're at the time by that point paying $40 million to a quarterback? No, you can't. You can't. You just can't do it. John C. says, say bye to Swain then. That block on that wide receiver screen was sad. Yeah, Brett Swain's a guy that a lot of people in the chat here like quite a bit, John. I'm a guy not as big on him as other people are. To me, he's just a guy, a jag. Just a guy. He's fine, but yeah, that could easily get him off the books. That kind of weak-ass block ain't going to work no more. He's going to have to bring it a lot harder than that moving forward. Whoever's in here is a wide receiver. I'd offer you a guy like David Moore. Sometimes it wasn't always didn't always play like these receivers aren't just going to get to be these little diva receivers doing their diva thing now. They're going to get dirty. They're going to get their nose in the dirt. They're going to be taking on bigger men and having to hold up. So, see how it goes. Washi, how much do I think we pay for DK? Yeah, I think Metcalf costs about $23 to $25 million a year. So probably a 4-year deal, $23 to $25 million a year. That sounds about right to me. That's after his third season too. So you get one more cheap year of him this year, but after next year, you're going to have to sign him to the new deal. Randall, sure seems like Lockett runs out of steam at the end of the year. It does a little bit. Yeah, he doesn't seem to be necessarily as impactful all the time. I would argue too, like he's a fine player, Randall, but he's just also, I know what he is at this point. And I think some of what he was before is not what he is now. I think he's a little bit lessened as a player. Could have been that leg injury he suffered a couple years ago, just robbed him maybe just of a smidge of some of his maybe quickness he had before and some of what made him so dynamic. But again, if it wasn't a matter where we were caught in a situation where we had to sign him to an extension here soon, I'd be holding on to him. But the fact the extension's coming up, he's due it. He's going to want to be paid it. Seattle normally pays it. That's where all roads end up leading to a trade from my aspect of things. Maxwell Stern says Stafford's way better in the fourth. He is a very good football player in the fourth quarter. It's one of the surprising stats, and looking through my research recently when I was looking at Russell Wilson, who's climbing the list. I think he's 18th now on the all-time NFL list in fourth quarter comebacks after this last year. But what was interesting was that Stafford's up ahead of him at like number 11 or 12. He's got a lot of fourth quarter comebacks. He's been a pretty clutch quarterback for that team over the years. Darker H, our third wide receiver, Van Jefferson, didn't play much this season, but in college he was a really good route runner. Yeah, as I understand it with Jefferson, Darker H, he has NFL pedigree from like father or uncle. So what the going word on him was supposed to be, Darker H, is that he was supposed to be basically one of those low ceiling, high floor type players. Where he came out and what he was what he was going to be. And specifically, the route running was already there, but he was not going to have necessarily some of the traditional explosiveness and things you're going to look for in that type of wide receiver. And the Rams don't always hold the explosiveness stuff, and they'll look for guys that aren't necessarily explosive if they can do other things. And I think he'll still be a pretty competent pro. He was a pretty safe pick from that angle, and he'll probably come along for you guys. I think you guys just had Robert Woods. You got Cooper Kupp, and then you had the other guy who's a free agent now. I forget his name, but I think he just got kind of stuck behind a pretty deep crew. Yeah, Washi. I think 20 million. You'd be lucky if you can get away with 20 million on it, Washi, at that time. Randall says, do we have a starting wide receiver on the roster after Lockett? Moore is gone. No, you would need to go and make a move. You would. That's why I think if you trade, my quick easy move here would be you trade Lockett and go get Kadarius Toney out of Florida. Now you've solved a little bit of the wide receiver situation. You got your slot guy in there now. He would fit well, I think, with DK Metcalf. Nathaniel Parks, trade Diggs and move Blair in there. Draft a pass coverage strong safety so then Jamal can play more as a linebacker. I think they're going to probably keep him in strong safety moving forward, Nathaniel. I don't think they're going to move Adams in that kind. I know that you're not alone. There's a lot of folks that want to see Adams move to linebacker, but I don't think Seattle does it, especially if they end up paying him $16 million a year this offseason, which I probably think they will. You're not going to pay $16 million a year for a linebacker normally. I'm even looking at this $18 million we're paying a year for Bobby Wagner, it doesn't look like a great deal in retrospect. So I think there'd be some hesitancy on that. Randall McDaniel, I like Curtis Samuel from Carolina, would be awesome on jet sweeps, fairly productive without a cornerback. Word on the street, Randall, is that he is due to sign a contract with the Washington football team, I believe. So Washington football team is supposedly going to sign him. There's already a deal in place. We'll see. I don't know if that's the case, but we'll see. Getting some more coffee. I will be right back. We're back. Philip Wiseman, thank you for the $5 donation, sir. I give you the double salute. You're too kind, my brother. He's got the mic drop bird. Love it. Love it. Nathaniel Parks, if Dwayne Brown retires and with limited draft capital, how do we get a left tackle if there aren't any good ones in free agency? There are good ones in free agency, Nathaniel, or at least there's due to be. You've got Trent Williams, which may be a bit of a pipe dream, but the Niners don't necessarily have a lot of cap space. I expect them to sign him at some point, but it's odd they haven't given him an extension yet. On Alejandro Villanueva from the Steelers. He's very good. Villanueva is very good. Very good. He's available. Could be a decent guy. You could replicate a little bit of what you did with Dwayne Brown, bringing him in, a solid left tackle veteran, not a young guy that's going to break the bank. I think that'd be a bit of a decent move. Cam Robinson of the Jaguars might be interesting, though I don't know if he fits exactly into that movement left tackle type guy that they're going to want necessarily. I'll tell you the tough part for me on this point, tough part of this one for me, Nathaniel, is the fact that you looked at last year's left tackle, and it would be, when I was watching the tape last year, those left tackles, it was like one after another. Oh, yes, look at his feet. Look at his kick step. Oh, my God, he's got hand punch, leg drive. Oh, my, there's no weaknesses. And then you go to the next guy. Oh, my God, no weaknesses. And the next guy. Oh, my God, there's no weaknesses. And then I start watching tape last night of the tackles in this draft, and it's just like, oh, goodness, lazy effort, lack of athleticism, technically sound, but got short arms and can't move. Just, it's going to get hard. It's going to get hard to do it in the draft. They're going to have to do it in free agency if they do probably go for the left tackle. Nathaniel says, Jose Rodriguez says, we also need a tight end. Yeah, we do, Jose. We do. I like my dark horse candidate on that one, Jose, is Jonnu Smith, the tight end for the Tennessee Titans. He's kind of a complete tight end, could be interesting. I know a lot of folks are thinking maybe Gerald Everett because Waldron will have some past history with him a little bit. I think they'll look for more of an inline guy, though. I think they like what they have in Colby Parkinson as the move joker tight end, so they'll look for more of the secondary inline guy to pair with Disley. Jose Rodriguez is going to ask in because I think you saw that in the question. How do you spell your Twitter handle? Oh, okay. It's so Seahawks, plural, SEAHAWKS, Nester, NESTER. So Seahawks Nester, like a nest, NESTER. Random McDaniel says, I could see Diggs holding out. It's going to be hard for any players to be holding out this upcoming offseason with the lack of cap space, because the leverage you always bring into play with holding out is the thought process that there is a team in the league, there's someone out there who's going to pay me. You don't want to give me the money, he's going to pay me. But is there that guy out there that's going to pay a guy like Quandre Diggs? Maybe. Maybe you get a guy, like, for instance, you're getting Gus Bradley going to the Oakland Raiders. He's inputting the Seattle scheme over there. He's going to give it another try. They're going to give it another run over there. Raiders are going from cover 2 to cover 1. Gruden's going to do is cover 1. So he could maybe be a target for them, potentially, maybe a little bit. But hard to see a guy holding out because there's just not going to be as many teams vying for services. And I don't know who would. If there's somebody you can trade to, and if you even hear a whisper of that, then move on from him. I'll tell you that much. Maxwell Stern, did you see the offensive coordinator's press conference? If so, what did you think about what he said? I did see his press conference. It was pretty vanilla. I liked what he said. I kind of what I would have expected. We're going to run the ball, but then also be explosive. There wasn't anything that he said that really caught me off guard or surprised me versus what I thought going in. It's pretty much what I thought and understood would be what he would have to say. But he sounds good and competent. Doesn't sound like a, sort of just a little baby Hugh type. Just kind of like, I like coaching football. He seemed on it and engaged and all that. So I liked what I saw from that. But nothing mind blowing. He's gonna bring a scheme, do what they do. Pretty much all of what we kind of thought there. Dark RH has got early predictions for the NFC West. Oh wow, Dark RH predicting the Rams winning the division. Shocker. He's got the 49ers at 11-5. You have the 49ers at 11-5 without a quarterback. You have the 49ers better than the Seahawks as we stand right now. Okay. I'm not even reading through the rest of your list. I'm not reading through after that point. Your list is now in my trash bin the second I see that. Aniti. How you doing, Aniti? NFC West early predictions. She's got, I like yours better. Seahawks 14-2. 49ers 12-4. Rams 11-5. Cardinals 10-6. I like it. I like Anita's better, Dark RH. Anita's got a lot better. That list, that works. That works for me. Bleed Blue and Green says, is B-Wags retiring? Are we going to get rid of him and or KJ Wright? Well, I do not expect B-Wags to retire. He's due to make some money next year, and I would expect him to want to make that money. KG Wright, I do think will move on. He's indicated he wants to get paid bank this year, commiserate with his production on the football field. And in my opinion, I'm sure the front office's opinion, he's already been paid commiserate with his being paid on the football field. They paid him good money. I wouldn't expect them to have the money to pay KJ at this point, so he probably does move on. B-Wags, there's a lot more of a potential here, bleed blue and green, of him being moved in a trade. I would have told you mid-season, no way that they're going to move on from Bobby. You'll be here another year at the very least, at least another year at minimum. But I could see more and more of it potentially happening again, just for the fact, same thing, this is kind of fits under the Tyler Lockett category of things. Not that the player isn't good, not that the player isn't still useful, but the problem is that you only have about 1, 2, 3 players who can really open up the cap if they move on from the team. And in Bobby, you have a guy who saves you $10 million. And in Tyler, you have a guy who saves you $10 million. And in Quandre, you have a guy who saves you $5 million. Well, past that, there's not a lot of other guys you can move for at that point to make anything happen. It just gets light. So he is a potential just for that reason. Crazy Loner. How you doing, Crazy? What do we do at defensive coordinator? I hope to God Norton won't be back in that position. Do we look outside or promote from within? Unfortunately, Crazy, I hate to be the wet blanket here, but Norton's not going anywhere. He got the back half of that schedule where he seemed to have righted the ship by, and this is not me saying that, by what I would probably, if I'm crawling inside of Coach Carroll's head, going right through earlobe on in, I would say as I'm inside looking around at the empty vacuous space, I would say, oh, he likes Norton, and he's not blaming Norton for any of the struggles last year. At the end of the day, this is Coach Carroll's defense. And yeah, there's been times he's probably put the blame on a guy like Chris Richard and shipping him out of town. But I think especially for a guy like Norton, who's been here for so many years, he's going to want to look into the direction of how do I keep him? How does he stay? How does he remain? And that last 8 games provided that reason for Carroll to look at it and squint his eyes and say, yeah, pretty good defensive coordinator job this last year, I think. Pretty good. Meanwhile, ignoring the fact that the back half schedule of offenses was a lot easier to deal with than what you dealt with on the front half. And that, you got to play against a couple of backup quarterbacks throughout that time period. And that maybe some of what we were seeing on that back half could be looked at as a bit of a mirage if going into next year, the schedule does turn out to be as tough as it appears to first be at first blush. Oh, $5 donation from Barry Sotoro. Thank you, Barry, for the $5 donation. I do salute you. Says, is there a better redemption story if Sherman and Thomas came back next season and won a Super Bowl with Russell? I can't think of any. Barry. I would love to see it, man. I would love to see it. I really would. I'm not usually a big nostalgia guy, but in this case, in this situation, I'd make an exception. Great suggestion, though, Barry, and thank you for the $5 donation. I love where your mind's at. Maxwell, any standout draft picks? I'm too early in the process. I give you a couple names, but again, it's just looking over the wide receivers, running backs, tackles that I've looked at, and I haven't gone down to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys quite yet. Once I get into there, there's always a couple guys I always like in there too. So I need to get into a little bit more on my list. I'll be looking more tonight. If you guys got some more names of guys you want me to take a look at specifically, but we got Dylan Hayes as my first guy tonight that I'll take a look at, and we can keep adding on to this list. But I'm going to start diving into it a little bit more, Maxwell, now as we're getting along to draft season. Insanity Mixes, what should we do with the offensive line, and do we let Shaq walk? Yes, you let Shaq walk because you just don't have the money to pay for him, and somebody's going to pay him a contract of probably around $8, $9, $10 million a year. Even if it was at $7 million a year, I don't think I'd want to sign him for that. But I would expect that he's going to get more than that. So he goes. I would think offensive line-wise, I would love to target a guy in the second round, man. Who's the best left guard you got on the board in the second round? Who's your best guy right now? Well, this guy, but we've got a little bit of a late second round grade. I might be okay with that. Or left tackle. I just want to see them reinvest in this offensive line. I like the thought of getting another guy who's young on a cheap deal here to pair with Damian Lewis over the next couple of years. What if we could build a young, cheap offensive line that's actually really talented? Nathaniel, I thought you move off Jaron Reed to save $9 million and move Diggs somewhere, and that saves you $14 million. And then you bring in a cheap defensive tackle in free agency. You could do it that way. I'm less apt to move off of Jaron Reed because I think I'm a little higher on him than other people are, and it's only a 1-year deal that you have him on moving into next year. So I might lean more into holding out to Jaron because really what I want to do is not have to do a lot on this defensive line this offseason. I want to target the one really good player as a pass rusher, bring in maybe Irvin as another rotational guy to add into that mix. Round it out a little bit with some cheaper guys at that point, but just add the one prime guy and then leave the rest of what you got at the defensive tackle thing. See if Brian Monet gives you another year of development. Puna comes back, Jaron's back. They know how to. They've got familiarity at that point with the system. I think I'd lean more in that direction. Emmett says, I'm just here to listen. Till I got to crash. Good to see you, though. Good to see you, Emmett. And I did see your comment on doubling down on the Russell to the Jags because you got, of course, the Jaguars, if you folks weren't aware, Schottenheimer was hired as their passing coordinator. And now they have Bevel as their offensive coordinator. And so there was a thought process from Emmett on this one. He was saying in the chat, he thought maybe he was bringing on these coaches for Russell, which would be funny. Which wouldn't be funny, but that'd be crazy. But as always, you're always creative on that one, Emmett. You always are, man. John C. says, well, the new general manager for the Carolina was just on the Hawk staff. So someone had the eye on Sullivan, laughing out loud. That could be it as well, John. Could have been just a straight plucking, and this guy ends up being a decent player. I do go back to what I went to on draft day with him, though, is that, he's never cracked much of the lineup with LSU as a receiver. Then he went over to tight end, and, he had to compete with Randy Moss's son there. Randy Moss's son was not that good of a tight end for them, really. He was okay, but he was 6'1" and small. This guy's gargantuan with arms that are so long his knuckles drag on the ground when he walks. All the guy to then go into be that tight end, but he never developed into it. He's a guy that I just wonder at the end of the day, look, there's a reason they're a 7th-round pick. There's a reason that they moved him over to defensive end midway through the year. I mean, did they really believe he was going to set the world on fire at defensive end at that point? Dark Right, Seahawks clearly weren't an actual 12-4 team. Anyone unbiased fan watching those games knows that. Half the season, Russ carried. Second half, defense carried. You guys have no offensive line either. Yep, I disagree on all accounts. As someone much more smarter than me once said, your record is what it is. You are what it is at the end of the year. You played through your schedule. You don't control your schedule. You can only play who you play. And if you're 12-4 at the end of the year, you were 12-4 at the end of the year. We certainly weren't playing our best football by the end of the season, Darker H. You're playing better at certain times in the year in other games than that game. You probably played your worst game of the season or one of your worst games of the season at the worst time of the year. And that sucks to see. It always does. But they were a 12-4 football team, and it doesn't matter whether a quarterback's carrying them or a defense is carrying them. You get to 12-4, you're 12-4. And again, on this O-line being bad thing, I got to just, again, I'm going to shoot this down once on this stream, and I'm going to do it just one time only. The Seahawks did not have a bad offensive line last year. Let me repeat that one more time for the people in the cheap seats. The Seahawks did not have a bad offensive line last year. Look at the advanced metrics. Top 12 pass blocking, 4.8 yards per carry with the running backs. The Seahawks offensive line was not some great, horrific thing. Again, Dark Rage, I think you're being captured a little bit by the moment of what you saw recently, by the last game you saw, as opposed to the collection of a full season of games, the full breadth of all those games in totality and what they mean. Emmett, I still think Bevel and Shoddy being in Jacksonville is interesting. We'll have to trade Lockett so Lawrence can wear number 16. Yeah, I would expect I'd expect them to make a couple moves if they did that, man. They would go hog wild on that one if they went that route. But it's interesting that he did hire 2 former Seahawks offensive coordinators to his staff. I guess he just has that much favor for Coach Carroll, That's all I can kind of take away from for the moment. That's all I take away from that, Emmett. To be determined. C's Velasquez. How you doing, C's? Predictable? What's predictable, C's? Maxwell, McVay plus Stafford sounds deadly, but the Seahawks will still own the West in 2021-2022. Mark my words. I love your confidence, Maxwell, and I'm right there with you. I'm not ready to give them this division yet. Let me see an offseason first. If Seattle manages to punt this offseason, then I might be on that board, that train, but I'm not there yet. Not there yet, man. Ramon, how you doing, Ramon? Brian Huang, how you doing, Brian? What's more important to get this offseason, corner offensive line or defensive line. I would put the order of importance, Brian, offensive line, cornerback, and then defensive line a little bit, but I'm going to do it this way. I'm going offensive line, defensive line, and corner. My reasoning behind this being that I'd like to get a better, Mike Iupati's been solid for us for the last couple of years, but we need to improve the position there. And this is a good time to do it. As well as we know Dwayne Brown's going to be moving on here soon to retirement. If it's not this offseason, it'll be the next offseason as well. Even if he plays next year, he's a guy who's had a lot of injuries throughout his career. To expect him to be able to hold up for a full course of a year next season is probably expecting a little bit too much. So you're going to need to get another guy there. That's really the two priority points for me. And on defensive line, it's really specifically just attacking one pass rusher, specifically maybe finding a good Leo. Because you got Dunlap over on the left side, and you have Darrell Taylor who could potentially round out to be a pretty good Leo for you. But I'd like to get more of an assured guy there, be it a Yannick Ngakoue type, perhaps. So that'd be my point. That'd be where I'd go with it. So the problem Dark RH comes back to again, this thing where people do these somersault flips in order to tell people where you've got a 12-4 team and you're going, well, you weren't really 12-4 because if this hadn't happened, and if that didn't happen, and if your schedule wasn't easy, and you can play the if game all you want, but that's not what reality played out to being. And everyone told us last year when we got to play the Packers in the playoffs, everyone said last year, well, we're really not that team to get to that playoffs. So if you look at their score differential, if you pay attention to the differential, you would then notice that Seattle's really not that good and they're just really relying on the miracle game and doing all the da-da-da-da-da. And they made those excuses last year. And now we're making the excuses again this year. So what happens when it's 12-4 again next year? Is it going to be more excuses again? Well, everybody got injured in the division this year. So, how do you guys just got luck through on it? Like, you just had to, because everybody got injured. How were you guys going to, you can make those excuses, but they don't really hold up for me. They just don't. You win the division, you won the division. Doesn't matter. You guys played through the same level of competition as us. You didn't end out with the same record. You had to play the AFC East. You had to play the NFC East. But somehow, magically, we did better than you on the record front. We played through the same division games you guys did. You played almost the exact same schedule as us. So what's your excuse on that? Paul Manning, can the Seahawks find the missing pieces to help Russell? They can, Paul. That first step, like I was telling you about earlier, was getting the offensive coordinator, and that's a big step. That's like almost worth 2-3 steps on its own. But now, reinforce the offensive line. Another playmaker on the offensive side of the ball, a guy that can run those jet sweep type plays that we're talking about a little bit. Maybe another tight end that you're getting in on the mix. I think these things are going to go far to helping him. I think more than him needing a player, it was more him needing the stuff from the head up to get fixed. More of the getting a guy in here who can help him out on pre-snap stuff, on disguising stuff, on playing the quarterback position at a little bit of a higher level of play. I think this guy has the potential to take him to that point. We'll have to see if he's able to do that. Randall, do you think behind the scenes, Russ gave Pete more or less an ultimatum on the offensive coordinator hire? Who or what made Pete decide to basically give in? Think he heard the fan base starting to question him? I'm not sure. I've not yet seen any evidence. In the last question, I'm not sure I've seen any evidence that Carroll listens to the fan base in any way, shape, or form. I would argue there's certain points where he might even be a little tone deaf on stuff like that. Maybe they do, but I don't know that they do with that. I would think that I agree with you that I'm sure Russ came back to him and gave him a kind of ultimatum. You saw this in the two different press conferences they had a couple days apart from each other where Carroll comes out and says we need to run the ball more and we need to dive back down the running game, being effective and explosive in the running game. And then then Russell comes out a couple days later and says we need to score 24 points before the half. So it was a little bit of back and forth going on in the press between the guys, as well as Russell also coming on the press and saying he wanted to have a say in the offensive coordinator role, which my point at the time was, why is he saying this publicly? Shouldn't he be making a call to Carroll to tell him this? If it's getting to the point that he's saying this publicly, does that then mean he's not getting it privately? I don't know if that's the case or not, but I'm sure that I don't know that Carroll's got the stones to move on from Russell. I think he probably looked at the Brady-Belichick breakup recently. That might have come a little factor into it a bit, where it's like, man, Brady's doing pretty good outside of Belichick at the moment. Belichick's not doing great. Could that happen to me? I don't know. There's a lot of conjecture on this, Randall, because we don't know. We don't know inside of what they're really thinking with these situations. Nessie, I guess. Pete's not interested in dinking and dunking the ball. His words, not mine. Yes, correct. He is not necessarily, and that's, the Rams offense has not necessarily been a lot of dinking and dunking, really. They'll dink and dunk off the play action stuff, but they're looking to hit some shots. I mean, they're looking to attack you on the post routes and intermediate stuff a little bit more. They're trying to go down the field a little bit. Now that's been a problem to Russell's game. He's not been a great intermediate thrower of the football, but that is what he is gonna bring. So not as much dink and dunk, a little bit more chunk than that. Cappy McCappy, how you doing, Cappy? He says Russell needs to restructure his contract so guys can be signed. I agree, Cappy. I've been pounding that drum for a while. When you ask to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL year after year after year after year, or not the highest, but one of the highest paid, and every 4 years you're asking for a new contract extension, and every time those contract extensions go to the midnight hour of the extensions, to the final point before you finally go, okay, fine, I'll sign. Well, it gets harder to build out the rest of the team. And we knew coming into this year's playoff that no quarterback earning more than 13.4% of their salary cap had ever won a Super Bowl in the modern era, and that player being Tom Brady. And now we look at the two quarterbacks in this particular Super Bowl, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, both two quarterbacks who are sitting on discount deals. Brady taking a $25 million one-year deal, and Mahomes taking his 10-year, $500 million deal, which was a discount when you factor in the first couple of years of cap hit on that deal are very, very low. So again, I would argue with that there's a little bit of a lesson there to be learned, not just for general managers, but for quarterbacks throughout the league. Drew Brees is about to retire. With that extra $50 to $75 million he's got in his pocket of $400 million maybe he's made throughout his career, is he really going to look at that little bit of extra money in his pocket and go, I'm glad I pushed every last bit of negotiations, got that extra last bit of chunk I could grab? Or is he going to be looking at that chunk of change going, I could be $30 million lighter right now and one Super Bowl ring heavier and a whole lot happier. And it's that view of hindsight 2020 that I think Russell will miss on with this stuff if he ends up finishing out his career as just a one-ring guy. Especially if he continues throughout the course of his career to insist on being that high-paid guy at every juncture. I think that's gonna be something that could eventually hang over the top of him. Who you got in the Super Bowl? Enrique, I'm supposed to say the Chiefs, man, but I just think Tom's going to pull off something again. Something about having the two main guys that really actually give me the confidence here, Enrique, are Antoine Winfield coming back for the secondary for the Buccaneers, and then them having Vita Vea back. Remember, they didn't have Vita Vea for a large part of this season, and he's maybe one of the most, if not the most important part of that front four. May not be the best player, but just the most important player to that front four. I mean, this guy's a modern-day Haloti Ngata. He's that kind of type of player. I go back to thinking, I think they're going to pull it off. I don't know. Dark RH, Shanahan, 29-35 as a head coach, losing 3 to 4 losing seasons and made the postseason once. McVay, 43-21. Record never had a losing season, made postseason 3 out of the 4 times. Yeah, I'd say both two guys inherit two different situations, Dark RH. Nothing happens in a vacuum cleaner. Both of these coaches didn't start on a starting line and go, okay, we're both at an equal starting point from a roster standpoint, go. Shanahan's made the most out of the roster he's had on the offensive side of the ball, where he's not had the same sort of resources put into it that McVay had. McVay had a guy in Todd Gurley's a top 10 talented running back walking the door, number 1 overall pick, an offensive line that was one of the top 5 in the league. He had a lot of, Schneid gave him a real nice little lay-in there to come in. I don't think that Shanahan had the same thing he was walking into on the offensive side of the ball. They had an old Joe Staley who was eroding, nothing at right tackle, nothing on the inside of their guards. Their line was a mess. No real playmakers on the outside. No real feature running back. You've got to take that into account. He's not the general manager as well. He's just the head coach. Birds of Prey says, as long as Pete is head coach, nothing will ever change. Maybe not. We shall see. Ramon says, if it wasn't for Russ, Pete Carroll would have been exposed a long time ago. Russ doesn't need to restructure a damn thing. Quit reaching for his wallet. Russ should demand a trade. And I remember you being very, very, very sensitive on this, Ramon, in the comments section a couple weeks ago. And I responded to your comment on that, and I respond to it now. It's not about reaching into the wallet, Ramon. If Russell makes $1 trillion in his career, more power to him. More power to him. It's the reality, Ramon, that guys like Aaron Rodgers, guys like Drew Brees, who have insisted on being paid top of the line. Those teams struggle to then build the rest of the team around them. It's the reality, Ramon, of the salary cap era. And when you as a player make twice the amount of the second player on your roster, twice the amount, when you're making that much more than the next player, it's very hard to build your team. Again, I know, Ramon, you mentioned again, and I didn't see you respond to my comment on it when I posted it in the comment section, but you didn't have a counter for it at that point in time. Do you have a counter for it now to where you understand what we're talking about? I don't care about his wallet. I'm talking about the salary cap. It's a finite amount of space. You understand that concept, right? There's only so much the cap is, and this year it's going to be reduced. So that finite amount of space gets even more finite. Dark Rage says, don't give the excuse that McVay had better teams before McVay came in. The Rams were last in the weak NFC West at the time and had the worst offense in the league. After he came in, fourth best offense. Yeah, because you had a lot of young guys that were just walking in through the door starting to develop as players, Dark RH. I mean, that's, again, it's not an excuse, it's the reality. So you're saying that your belief, Dark RH, is that both the Rams roster and the 49ers roster, when Shanahan came in and McVay came in, was exactly the same. You're saying that it was exactly the same. And again, I've spoken to you on this just a second ago, where I said that these are one of the top coaches in the league. We're talking about the two of the top 4 coaches, maybe 2 of the top 2 coaches in the league for all we know at this point. So you're really parsing between something very close and saying that there's this huge, there's not really a huge delineation between the both of them. They're probably very much on an equal level. But it's not out of bounds to say that the Rams had a lot more of a talented roster. Whitworth coming in, all that's a franchise left tackle. You know, Shanahan had Staley, 34 years old, wearing out. Coltrane, Duquette, go Hawks. Who do you think number 2 in our division will be next season? You already know who number 1 is going to be. Well, we will see. Certainly Darker H is all on board the Rams. I would probably say it's going to be the Rams or the 49ers competing for that spot. Some of it depends on Coltrane, what the 49ers do with the quarterback position. If it's Kirk Cousins instead of Matt Ryan, who I thought they were initially going to go after this offseason, then I'd probably give the edge to the Rams as the second place team. But again, I need to see what the Seahawks do from this offseason to put them in the first place spot. Let's see what they do, because they've got some moves that they've got to make. As we stand right now, we're not a top of the division team just standing right now by hiring an offensive coordinator. We've got to fix some things still. Russ, Bird of Prey says, Russ has literally carried Pete since the 2017 season and keeps him employed. Take Russ off that team, and Pete goes sub 500 every year. Well, it's been, I would say this has been a true statement, Bird of Prey, 2017, 2018, I might even give you 2019. And while it's the first half of the game, certainly first half of the season, Russell was happy to do that. This was one of the odd moments where we did see at the end of the half of the season, the back half of the 8 games, where it was Carroll's defenses pulling Russell along. Russell was playing at a below league average state through the back half of the schedule. Do I expect him to stay there and remain there? No, I wouldn't. It was strange to see, frankly. But Russell's not played peerless football throughout that time. He's had his share of dips in there as well, and he is a very streaky quarterback by his nature. You know, he'll give you 2.5 quarters where you're getting nothing, and then for a quarter and a half you get something. It's not always the easiest as far as playing around goes, but you know, again, I think he's going to get improved with the new offensive coordinator. Randall says, with the cap either decreasing or being stagnant, will the rookie salary slot be less in 2021 than 2020? I'm not sure on that one, Randall. Depends on what the CBA says about that, and they may have to come to some agreement with it. Green Mobster, I think you guys are going to make a run at Leonard Floyd. Just a gut feeling. He has the athletic build. He's got that size and length and explosion off the edge to be a Leo N for us. So he would fit from that standpoint. He is that one rare guy I was talking about earlier where I didn't think 3-4 guys really could come down and be down linemen and put their hand in the dirt all the time. He's one of those guys who can kind of do both. But I could see us plucking him, and where we saw that he would improve our team and also weaken the Rams a little bit. Seems like that's definitely on the menu for the Seahawks this offseason, is doing what they can to kind of weaken them down a bit. But yeah, I would feel solid about that. I don't think he's going to cost you that much money, Green Mobster. You're going to have to pay him a pretty penny, but with all the guys available on the market this offseason, I would think that you could get a little bit of a discount for him. Nathaniel Park says, what are the free agent wide receivers and which ones would I want to look at? There's only a couple that are really on there that I really look at and that interest me. The three names that jump out are going to be T.Y. Hilton, Corey Davis, and Josh Gordon. Looking at anything past that, I wasn't really very, very impressed with the wide receiver class. There's not any guys that are, you're more likely to me at that point making a trade, to be frank with you. But a guy in Corey Davis is an interesting one. I think former top 10 pick. I never really kind of realized his potential. It really started to come along this year. He'd be a really solid receiver for them. I thought he played really well. I don't know if he's going to cost a lot, but he could be a guy that'd be an interesting fit as a number 2 here. TJ says the best part about the new offensive coordinators, we won't go deep. We will use our tight ends a lot more, use all over the field. Yeah, he attacks those tight ends from, it's not just going to be in the seams where we kind of kept our tight ends, TJ. He's going to go out to the sidelines. He's going to get those guys right out on those edges. Again, that's the great thing about our offense and what they're bringing to play and what the Rams offense does is just it makes you not just attack the field lengthwise, but widthwise. You've got to every inch of blade of grass, as they say. That's what you've got to accomplish with defending this offense, and that's built within that is moving the players into different places and positions, not just same place every single time. Over the middle, sit down. Over the middle, sit down. Over the middle and sit down. No, it's going to be different now. Team 12 says, by the time you're reading this, I'll be back from eating dinner. Nice. Randall McDaniel, check out the wide receiver from Purdue named Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore. I will check him out. I will check him out for sure. Major Quicks, he's going to be who Tavon Austin wanted to be. Oh, Randall, you liking him a lot, huh? All right, I'll check him out tonight, man. Rondale Moore. Habitual joker. I think the Rams grabbed Stafford so they could better sell a high-powered offense to their fans and sell tickets. They opened their new stadium this year to nobody. Year 2 will be a hit. Oh. Yeah, well, and they've got, some of the strictest regulations habitual of any state over there in California. They'll be, maybe one of the least, only Santa Clarita probably is going to be waiting longer to open up their stadium to the fans. But it does make sense. The general manager and coach both seem to they were done with Goff. They were just really, really done with him. And time will tell if they were all completely right and they were getting what they could out of something that was really limited as a player goes. But at the end of the day, I know Goff's never going to be what Stafford's been as an NFL football player, but I still do wonder if Goff's got maybe a little bit of upside. Get him back into an offense where he's got an offensive line that can block for him as well as that 2018 offensive line block for him. And he might just be a player for you still. I don't think he'll ever be a Pro Bowler, but still a decent player. Part of the reason why I like the Lions taking this, the Rams eat that bonus money, then they're just on the hook for his base salary. They can release him at any time or trade him at any time without any hit to them. Smart move on their part, but solid comment, Habitual. I could see that being the case. Ramon says B-Wags needs to stay a Seahawk. I think he will. I don't think he's going to get traded. Random McDaniel says, would you kick the tires on OBJ? Probably not, because I think even if you trade for him, he carries a decent amount of base salary hit. Like he's at least going to cost you $2 million more than Lockett cost you on base salary, which is going to be tough to do. You'd have to rework the deal with him, and now that means you're committing to him multiple years, which I don't want to commit multiple years to OBJ. I think OBJ likes being a football player more than he is a football player. That's the impression I get. He likes the endorsements. He likes all the glamour and glitz that comes with the stuff, but I don't know that he's necessarily a guy you're going to win with. I don't think he's that. Green Mobster, Gruden should be charged with tampering with his conversation with Sherman. Sherman isn't a free agent yet. Yeah, that was a little interesting that he's on there talking with Sherman already saying, maybe we can have a talk, maybe we can get you in here. It's like, Jesus, John. And like I was saying, you got Gus Bradley's going to the Raiders. So they're now building the Seahawks defense in Oakland. So theoretically, Richard would be a target in that as they transition to a different type of cornerback because of that, I would think. But yeah, that was annoying, Green Mobster. That annoyed me. Liam Bonzel, we're not going 14. 14-2. Liam, you're not thinking so? It depends on the offseason, Randall says, I don't think Dwayne Brown retires. He had a great year, and I think we will manage. I think we manage him really well. One more shot for the old dog. I like it, Randall. And I would have thought we would have by now heard more of an indicator of that. I know players like to wait before they make the call. They don't like to just right after the end of the season say I'm in or out. But we should hear soon one way or another on that if he's going to make that decision. TJ Wilburn says, sorry, TJ, I just got to pronounce your first name, dude, because I butcher your last name. He says, tag Griffin and trade him. I don't think so. You tag Griffin, you're going to be paying $15 million on a one-year deal. Who's going to want to go trade for him at that point and then give him the big contract he's going to want? No, I think that there's no value in that. I don't think they would do that. They don't have the cap space to tag him at $15 million. Not as we stand now. You'd have to make some other moves to do that. Randall, Gruden, I love him, middle linebacker plus Gud Bradley. Gruden loves a middle linebacker plus Gud Bradley equals a second-round pick for Bobby. I could see them making a move for that, especially if they're looking for a leader in on that defense, which I know that they are. I think they thought Jonathan Abram was going to be more of that guy for them. But getting a guy in that front seven that can manage things for them would be a pretty good move for them. The one thing is with Randall is that they need a lot of help on their defensive line. Like they're not getting pass rush right now. And with the front four that they're bringing in for Seattle, I don't have to tell you, they've got to put a real onus on getting a defensive line that can get after the quarterback. They just haven't seen things pan out there really that much with those guys. Mark Hawk says, sign Blythe to play center. He can play left guard as well. There's actually a couple of centers out there. Alex Mack, Pouncey, Corey Lindsley, Andrews from New England. There's some decent centers. You could upgrade the center position this offseason if Seattle wanted to put a little bit of money into that, Mark. But I don't know too much about Blythe. I got to look a little more into him. At first, I didn't even know he was a free agent on my list. I didn't have him on there. I must have missed him. Nathaniel says, why do we move off Bobby? That only saves us $10 million of his $17 million salary, plus he's giving us elite level linebacker play. Well, again, this is like, I was speaking to Nathaniel, a little bit like the Lockett move. You're not making it because the guy isn't able to play anymore. You're making the move because there's like three guys on this whole roster right now that you can move off of and save substantial amounts of cap. Bobby Wagner, Tyler Lockett, Quandre Diggs. It's basically about it. And you're kind of up against it right now as far as the cap goes. And you kind of don't have a lot of draft picks. So you've got to find a way now to round out this 2021 roster with these limitations sitting in the back door. There's got to be a little bit of it's got to be making Schneider kind of think a little bit like, man, if I can move off one of these guys, I get a salary, I get a pick back. My draft looks better. I get $10 million in space back. Man, that's a lot more space. That's some breathing room. And again, now the kicker on this for me, Nathaniel, is you've got Jordan Brooks. Jordan Brooks was drafted to be your middle linebacker of the future. Whether this happens next year or 2 years from now, he's going to be your middle linebacker of the future, and that's going to be the position he plays best. He's not going to play his best at a will. He's going to play his best at a middle linebacker. So if Seattle thinks that by moving off from Bobby, they're inserting Jordan, and he's going to give them this. Remember, this is that percentage thing, right? You move on for Bobby, you get a second-round pick back, but then you move in Jordan Brooks into a slot, and he gives you 95% of what Bobby Wagner gets you at the middle linebacker position, and you save the $10 million, you can start to understand logically why it might start to make a little more sense. TJ says, our O-line sucked by backups, not by our starter O-line. Yeah, I think specifically Jamarco Jones and Jordan Simmons really struggled this year. The depth at the offensive line wasn't good, but the front line guys were fine. Green Mobster, McVay inherited Jeff Fisher's team. Shanahan and Lynch built the 49ers from the ground up. The only player they had was Buckner. Agreed, Green Mobster. Agreed. That's my point on this. It's, the situation matters. Every situation is different. No situation is equal. And this is saying it from the standpoint of a guy, I like McVay as a coach. He's right there with Shanahan. Maybe you ask me tomorrow and I tell you McVay's better than Shanahan. You're just catching me today, and I think Shanahan, with what he's able to do in his offense I think Shanahan gets a little bit more out of his talent than McVay does. Shanahan's a little bit less reliant on having elite talent across the board than I think McVay is. But McVay's still a fantastic coach, an absolutely fantastic coach. One coach who I think at this point is better than even Coach Carroll at this point. Mark says the O-line wasn't bad. The scheme was figured out. Shoddy, not good enough. And Pete never doubles Donald. It's getting old expecting guys like Iapati to block Donald 1v1. Yeah, solid points, Mark, and absolutely true. How many times have we seen over the years they just will not block Donald with a double team? And part of it is the hard thing that I spoke to a little bit earlier on this live stream show, being the difference between the left guard and the right guard. The right guard gets protection by the center most of the time. The center is going to slant to helping the right guard out in pass protection, and the left guard tends to be put out on that island. So you have to sort of change your offense up a little bit and how you want to operate when you move that center back over to help him out on the left guard. With that said, Donald's the type of player where you make that change. You do that. You make that choice. He should have been the guy they did it with. But I agree with you, man. I think the scheme's going to help this out quite a bit. Randall says, I could see the Niners. What was that? Oh. Randall McDaniel says, I could see the Niners trading for Sam Darnold or even Carr. They were in win-now mode, so I doubt they go rookie. Not sure Matty Ice will be available. Yeah, it does appear that Matty Ice is going to be put on ice by the Falcons. He's a legacy. He's a legacy hire. So he's probably going to be sitting with the Falcons for a good determinable amount of time. The Niners are going to make a move on a quarterback, Randall. Be it whether it's Donald, Carr, we were hearing maybe Kirk Cousins. I could see any of those three being potentially in the mix for that. Probably they would really look really hard at a guy like Donald or Carr because of the fact I don't think he's really breaking the bank. And I don't think you're going to have to sign him necessarily to a contract extension by bringing either of them in. So great suggestions on that. I could see either of those two being possibilities for them. Nathaniel says, you can't expect anyone to block Donald 1v1. End of discussion. Absolutely end of discussion. Period. Exclamation point. Emoji fist. You should not. If I'm playing Aaron Donald, I'm doubling. I'm not going to double team him all game, but I'm going to be doubling him a whole hell of a lot more than we've been doubling him. Maxwell says, people say we're only good because of our schedule, but usually Seattle's plays up or down to their opponent's level. Solid point, Maxwell. Solid point. And look, the year before we played the toughest schedule in the league. What about that, Dark RH? Didn't we get to 11 wins last year, playing the toughest schedule in the NFL while we were the most injured team in the entire NFL? Was that luck? Was it? Seems like the universe balanced some things out this year. Green Mobster, the 49ers will land Deshaun Watson. I am calling it now. If the 49ers land Deshaun Watson, I'm just going to do a stream where I cry for 4 hours. I just cry and blubber and wonder why. Why does our division have to be like this? Why can't we have an AFC East for 20 years? I want to beat up on people. I want to blow people out every week. But no, we get the minefield. We get the Vietnam minefield. Great. They might do it, Green Mobster. I mean, if I'm the Niners, I'm sitting there looking at what the 49ers have done, when I'm looking at the Seahawks potentially upgrading their offense just purely by bringing in a new coordinator, knowing the Cardinals get another year older with Kyler Murray there, and maybe they're always saucy in the background doing some things every season, every offseason. If I'm them and I want to be aggressive, man, Kirk Cousins, Carr, but you talk about going out and getting Deshaun Watson now. Tell you what, the only problem with the Niners is that one of those picks is going to be a top 10 pick over the next couple of years. You're giving up at that point. You know it. Emmanuel Mendahane, my patron. So good to see you, Emmanuel. Thank you for your patronages on my Patreon. I do have a Patreon page now, by the way, folks. And Emmanuel says, hey, gang, what have I missed? Yeah, I missed anything. I don't think anybody's super scared yet of the Stafford trade, but, we're concerned. We have some concerns. Could turn out really well, but nothing yet. Talking a little free agency, talking a little draft. We're kind of all over the place today, Emmanuel. And thank you for your patronage. Randall says, do we assume Marquise Blair is injury prone or just bad luck? Oh, just bad luck, Randall. I mean, I think anybody who had the most solid of ACLs, ligaments, has a 6'6", 255-pound monster dive into their knee. I think that's snapping a lot of ACLs out there. But no, I know he had a little bit of an injury stuff in the prior year, but no, I mean, he's a slight guy. That part's true. He's not your biggest 6 foot. He's like 6'1", 6'2", and he's kind of long and thin, but not quite yet there, ready to say that quite yet. He could get through the woods on this. I think he was going to have a big year last year before he got hurt. Maxwell Stern says Super Bowl predictions. I think the Bucs will keep it close at first, but then the Chiefs will start pulling away. I'm going to just because I'm trying to be contrarian to everybody's picking the Chiefs, Maxwell. So I'm going to stay with the Buccaneers. I'm going to go with let's go 27-24. How about that? Nathaniel Park says left guard, free agent Pat Eflin after he leaves the Jets. I like Pat Eflin. He'd be good. He'd be solid. Yeah, Maxwell, there's not a lot of guards out there. Joe Thunney's a guy you could look at. Brian Winters. John Miller is kind of more of a center, but could play a little guard. Feliciano from Buffalo would maybe be an interesting guy they could target. I believe he is a left guard. There's a couple guys out there that'd be interesting. I think Thuney would be the guy to the top of your list with that. Green Mobster says Brady has a 2-year, $50 million with the Bucs, I believe. Yep, 2-year, $25 million a year, which Brady should be, if he's playing at what would be his market rate right now, it'd be between $35 and $40 million, especially if you're talking about it being a small 2-year deal and not a 4 or 5-year deal. If you're on a smaller deal like that, you're going to get usually a little bit more money because it's a shorter deal. It benefits the team, less risk for them. But as he has throughout his career, he's taken a discount. And in taking that discount, they've been able to get an Antonio Brown where they were able to outbid Seattle for Antonio Brown services midseason. That's what that gets you when you have a quarterback willing to do that. Jeremy Bohm, coaches who listen to the fans are destined to sit with them. I do remember that old quote as well, Jeremy, and I agree with it. I do. I think the one point where you might make an exception to that is if you're hearing it from a small little roar of fans. That's one thing. When you have a huge, almost near past majority, almost a unanimous state at times, pointing out certain deficiencies to your coaching game, you might want to take a look at them. You don't necessarily have to decide to make a change, but you just might consider it at that point. Oh no, lost my thing. Remobster says Shanahan beats McVay with third stringers. Jose Rodriguez. Russ said this. Am I going to lose my thing again? Stay. Jose said, Russ said this about the offense. We got passive. We got to make sure that never happens again. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he means by that exactly, Jose, by passive. You know what I mean? I don't know Russ isn't always clear sometimes when he gets into talking about stuff. So what does he mean by passive? That they didn't want to go after the deep shot anymore because the teams were playing cover 2 and taking that away? Well, it's like a defense can take something away from you. You got to attack the vulnerability that now is opened. I mean, there is a little bit of a simplicity to football in that respect where, okay, this defense is running the cover 2 shell. So now we got to attack underneath, intermediate routes, this type of stuff. Shouldn't be as much seemingly like rocket science as it was to appear to us in the back half of the schedule, in my opinion. I would like to think this new offensive coordinator will get them to be able to attack in that way. Some of this, Jose, I think, is just updating the offense to not make it so easy to read pre-snap what the players are doing, or just to understand they come out in a certain allotment and it's going to be a bubble screen here. Or it's going to, they're going deep on this. They always go deep off these routes. So somebody's car is beeping outside. So we'll see if that's, but I don't know. What do you think he meant by that, Jose, being passive? Like, what do you think he meant as far as that specifically? Because I don't know what he really means by that. They still tried to throw. They probably ran more, but I don't know. Bird of Prey, it doesn't matter what the regular season record is. The postseason is what ultimately counts, and Pete has ignorantly squandered years of opportunities to advance further. No one else to blame. I agree. They should have gotten farther with the talent that they've had over the last few years. Getting booted out of the first round or just past the first round is, when we look at this in respect with the amount of talent we had out there, the Hall of Famers and the Pro Bowlers and all that stuff, we will have probably hoped that we could have gotten more out of this than what we've gotten in retrospect. Nathaniel says, why would they pay Kirk Cousins? That just guarantees they will lose at least a game because every team gets a Monday Night Football game. Kurt, prime time. When the lights are brightest, I shine the lowest Cousins. when the lights shine the brightest, I turn off the light switch. TJ says, there's fans here that get mad when we talk about moves that can happen, and they all get salty. It certainly is. There's some topics here of trade discussions that folks I've noticed get a little bit touchy with. And I think people fall in love with players on the team. TJ fall in love with players, fall in love with coaches. It's understandable. It's part of being a fan. So I can't begrudge him on it. And, it's just with us here on this channel that we've talked about, what we try to do is a little bit be more forward thinking on stuff. I've referenced, I like to think of this channel, especially these live stream chats, as almost like a think tank session. We're all coming together as a meeting of the minds and just sort of thinking out the possibilities of what could happen because it's fun. It's a fun thing about hot stove league items and who could draft and how you could draft and how you could roster build. You could go this route, you could go that route. I think there's a little bit of value in that. But I like the people too that like to wave the pom-poms. I don't have any problem with them. Like I've always said, I got no problem with them being like that, but they can't begrudge me being how I am either. Clara, how you doing, Clara? Hello, my friend. Your thoughts on our two new Rams coaches we hired for the Seahawks, Tyler Lockett and free agents. So it was really interesting to see the offensive coordinator bring over his offensive line, run game type coordinator for the Rams, because like I was saying last week, it's usually unusual if you get a coach who's, let's say, not an offensive coordinator with the team, but you're plucking him as a passing game coordinator to be an offensive coordinator. He's not usually going to get to now pilfer from the staff and bring more guys over. But part of me feels like because this is a division and there's this rivalry and Carroll just doesn't care, he's fully willing to, grab whoever you need to grab. Take whoever you need to take, buddy. Take whoever you need to take, Shane. Get whoever you need to grab. And so the one hole you could have maybe wondered about with Waldron being that he was a passing game coordinator was, what's he going to do with the running game? I mean, the running game is a very important aspect of what the Rams do. Well, he's bringing in a coach who specifically deals with the offensive line and that aspect of things. So loved seeing that other move on top of it, Clara. Those two things together really seem to fit well with each other on that. He'll bring along the passing elements. The run guy will bring along the running elements. And you should see some wholesale changes as far as the way our offense operates because of that. Tyler Lockett, I do still remain that he's probably the number one candidate to be moved this offseason. Just for the reasons being, do an contract extension. You can get some decent draft capital for him. I think he's at his highest value right now as he's probably ever been with his 100-catch season. And I think that $10 million you clear up is just the kicker to it. As far as free agents go, my kind of top targeted guys, I like Leonard Fournette. He'll be a free agent running back. I don't think he's found the right set place yet. I don't think he's going to cost a lot of money, but I think he'd be a perfect fit for us. Jonnu Smith of the Titans as a tight end, I think would be very interesting. Joe Thuney, a left guard with New England Patriots, will be a free agent. I think he'd be an interesting guy to maybe potentially target. Those would be the three guys kind of off the top of my head. And then I'd like to get a pass rusher. So if I'm looking at it, Yannick Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney, just a good, competent elder pass rusher, so to speak, that you can fit in there with the young guys, Clara. Because we got the four young guys. We got the four young horsemen. Rasheem Green, L.J. Collier, Darrell Taylor, Alton Robinson. All these guys they're all varied and unusual in their own way, but all of them have a good amount of talent. So now we just need more of a certainty as far as that pass rusher goes, in my opinion. Oh, man. I just got lost in the chat here. Sorry. Bear with me. I got lost here. My bad. My bad. All right, if I missed your comment, I'm sorry. I got lost a little bit here on my chat. Exploded. Oh, here we go. We're good. Barry says, Russ is in a group of quarterbacks that are great. Breeze, Rodgers, Mahomes, Favre. Sounds good, but includes Dilfer, Flacco, Hostetler, Brad Johnson, Jim McMahon, Mark Rippon, all one-ring quarterbacks. I do think he's better than those guys, though, Barry. I mean, those guys that you mentioned on there, every one of those guys was was a game manager quarterback. I think Russell's not been a game manager quarterback since probably the third year of his career, moving on. He certainly hasn't been the guy running a Patrick Mahomes-like offense, but he's been asked to do a lot more through that time, and he would be, the best of the bunch as far as, one of the best of the bunch is single ring guys. I think the Breeze, Rodgers, Wilson are in their own little tier that's below maybe the multiple ring guys. But those guys you mentioned are much further below that. Those guys are guys that got to benefit Johnson from one of the great defenses of the last 50 years. Same with McMahon in the 85 Bears defense. Mark Rippon had a complete team and a great running game. Dilfer, of course, the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, there's no coincidence that three of those quarterbacks you mentioned on there had all-time great defenses that got them into that Super Bowl, which I know Seattle did as well with Russell, so you could make that argument too, but he got back to a second one as well. Nathaniel says, I have a gut feeling that the offensive coordinator hire will be a failure. Hope I'm wrong, but this guy has never called a play before in the NFL. Well, and as they say, you got to start somewhere. Nobody's ever called a play, and Sean McVay, I don't think had a chance to call a play until somebody gave him a chance. So that's just kind of the case with everybody. But you're right, because of that factor, because it's not a certain thing, you don't know necessarily that it will work out for sure. I've said that this is if Schottenheimer was really a high floor, low ceiling hire, meaning the guy was not going to reinvent the modern day NFL offense and turn you into this super explosive team, but he was going to hold the water and be capable. That's the high floor aspect of it. This guy's the complete opposite. He's got a low floor. He could wash out. He could be nothing, but he's got a much higher ceiling than what we had as Schottenheimer as far as a coordinator goes. Darren West, would you sign Todd Gurley on a one-year prove-it deal? No. Everything that I watched in Todd Gurley last year to me showed a guy that's done. I don't see the explosiveness or speed that he once had. I have no interest in Todd Gurley at all. Not at all at this point. Chase, Stern says, what do you think about maybe signing Curtis Samuel from Carolina? The reports I heard are pretty solid that he's going to Washington at this point, that there's already a deal in place. So probably not, especially for the money that it looks like he's signing. If we're signing him for that type of money that he's going to make, then I might as well just sign Tyler Lockett on a contract extension. The key to bringing in a receiver this offseason is they've got to cost at least about half of what Lockett's due to make this next season. That's the point of saving that cap space and moving him in the first place. Team 12 says, did you hear about Luck that he might unretire? I did hear that. He might. It's not a bad time for him to come back, man. His offensive line's in place there with the Colts. If he comes back to Indianapolis, I don't know if that's where he would. Indianapolis, of course, needs a quarterback now at this point. They've got a running game. Jonathan Taylor looks good. Probably could use a couple more receivers, maybe a tight end, but it's coming back at a good time. Nathaniel, why do you think the O-line played better this year? Could it be because they were almost charged with murder of Russ the past several years? I would tend to think that it starts always with an offensive line at the left tackle position. And you look at a year ago, Dwayne Brown was beat up, fighting through two injuries. I think he had a knee surgery midseason, nearly a torn bicep. It's hard to play at a high level of play when you're at that state. The whole rest of the line was beat up last year as we got in the playoffs as well. Iapati was done. You were down to your third string center. I think DJ Fluker had really been diminished at that point. He had Jermaine Ifedi starting for your right tackle. This year, you look at it, and Shell was one of the successes from the free agent period. The guy gave you at least league average play at right tackle when for years you've been dealing with Ifedi, who's given you well below league average right tackle play. Then you look at Damian Lewis, gave you upper level guard play, where DJ Fluker the last couple of years have given you below league average guard play. And when you look at Ethan Posick, though he didn't even give you, I would say, league average center play, just a little below league average center, that's still that's a wide range higher than Joey Hunt last year, getting bulldozed every other play by 320-pound defensive linemen. And the same thing's true with Iapati. He was beat up this year, but I think a little more healthier than he was last year. these things help. So health was a big part of it. You upgraded as well at two different positions. And these things really lent themselves to it. I think this is why as well, target left guard upgraded now. You've gotten some of the places and positions are just right. Things are kind of rounding out a little bit more on that line. Just target certain spots now to get that round out finished. And I think they can. All right, I'm getting some more coffee. 1 second. Alrighty. Randall says, do you think Peter John ever talked to Russ and just say, you know what we could do with an extra, you know what we could do with an extra $5 million off your salary? 10 to 15% would be huge. Yeah, Randall, I think that I would like to think they broached the subject with him, Randall. I'd like to think that they probably broached the subject with them on the last contract negotiations, but I would offer that this is a place where there's a little bit of friction between the two parties. And the evidence for this being that both of the two negotiations on the two major deals that Russell Wilson signed in his professional career took up to the very last minute to get the deals done. Then you've got the rumors of the potential trade to Cleveland, and then the rumors of Russell wanting to be paid 20% of the cap that would slide up and down every year based on where the cap was positioned at. Potentially putting him in a position to start making a lot more money a lot faster than any other quarterback in the game at that point. So I think that there's a little bit of a separation here in the way that they both look at the situation. I think Russell wants to maximize out his dollars. I don't begrudge him for that. I will never begrudge any football player for wanting to get the most amount of money they could. But the reality of that is then as well, it's very hard to build the rest of your roster out. It's very hard to field a competitive team that can really push for the Super Bowl. You can get a competitive team, but to push for the Super Bowl, that's where it gets a little bit tougher in my opinion. Randall says the proof is in the pudding regarding quarterbacks and salaries. Russ can't have it both ways. He can't have a superstars plus break the bank. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. We've got a lot of data here, folks. When you look at it being not Russell Wilson, but centric to the fact that there has not been a quarterback in the modern era who has made more than 14.5% of the salary cap of the team than they won, and that was Tom Brady. Every other one beyond Tom Brady's basically you're looking at rookie quarterbacks on rookie deals, a la Russ in 2013, a la Russ in 2014. That is the model. Brady in that 13.4% is the anomaly, and Russ right now is making, well above the 14.5%. Especially this year with this cap. There's a lot of quarterbacks who've been paid in this modern era. Your Staffords have been paid, your Bradfords have been paid, your Wentz has been paid, your Goff's been paid. Not a lot of data to show that you, in paying your quarterback $35 million a year, are going to now be able to get back to the Super Bowl. There's actually all there's this mountain of data on the other side of it to show you're not getting back to the Super Bowl if you pay your quarterback that. We understand it's hard to find the quarterback. We get it. Yep, hard to find a franchise quarterback. Completely true. That's a truth, and this is also a truth. Both of those things are true. Keep getting lost in the chat. William Harding, how you doing, William? Your comment got, there we go. Hey, Harding. Hey, William. Good to see you here, man. Been a minute. Jay Hornsby, you think Russ needs to lose a little weight? And do you think that he'd benefit it? Go Hawks. Thanks, bro. Love the channel. Oh, thank you, Jay Hornsby. It may. I think that the little bit of the reason why he carries a little bit of that weight, I think, is to take the pounding you got to take, to have the 300-pound bodies landing on top of him. I think it aids him probably a little bit in that. And that Russ doesn't strike me as a guy who doesn't do things without a reason. And I think that's the reason that he's probably gone that route. But it is a little bit, you certainly can note, Jay Hornsby, when you look at some of the early highlights of him in 12, 13, 14, he does look a lot more svelte. He was getting much deeper on that belt, notch-wise. You know what I mean? he's gone back a couple notches since that time period. And he certainly, as we saw this year, is not getting away from players like he once used to. This is why he's got to learn to play on time so much more. He's got to learn to fit within the structure of the offense that much more, because if he's going to lose that athleticism, if he's not going to be as fleet of foot, not going to be able to pirouette out of stuff like he once used to at will. Okay, if you're not able to do that, then you got to make up for it now in other places. You gotta balance that load back off, and that's the place that he's going to have to kind of try to find now in order to do that. It's going to be in playing on time. You get to your third, 5, 7 footstep drop, balls out of your hand, trust your read, these type of things. We'll see if he can make that transition, but that's the big transition he needs to make, to me, Hornsby, rather than losing weight. I think he's going to be the Pillsbury type size we've got him at right now, and that's just where he is. But that doesn't mean he can't still flourish as being a little bit thicker. Oh, geez. Jeremy Bowen, the Rams and the 49ers are in more salary cap hell than the Hawks. They are. And they've got some weird decisions to make. We just saw with the Rams. They get in Stafford. But again, as I started out this show saying, you got $22 million in dead money hit that you just hit. That's the largest dead money hit in NFL history. You don't just sort of shake your way through that. You don't just kind of knuckle down through that. That's going to hurt you in some way or another. Or more teams would be having that kind of hit come to their cap when they've got a player they want to get rid of. Teams just don't usually do this. And likewise with the 49ers. They've got Trent Williams is going to want to be paid top of the market. He's going to want to probably better Laramie Tunsil's deal, or at least match Laramie Tunsil's $20-some-odd million deal from a couple years ago. Once he does that, and once they then get out of Garoppolo's contract, which is going to be a negative $4 million cap hit, then they've got to go get another quarterback and then pay him. So they certainly are still in a tough situation. On top of the fact they've got holes, they're losing Sherman, one of their leaders on defense. They've got a high pick, but they definitely, that's why I've said before I'm going to vault in the Rams, the Niners, Jeremy, to be in that, they won the division with this move. Let's watch through the whole offseason, and I include Seattle in that. Let's see what they do through this offseason. Let's see the adjustments they make. If any of these teams kill it in the offseason, you'll overcome everything. The Niners could kill it this offseason, bring in the quarterback, knock it out of the park with that 12th pick, make some key signings at certain spots, and that defense roars back to life next year because it's healthier. Bosa coming back, D Ford coming back. Look out. Look out with that team. But it's going to be important for all three of these teams to make a lot of magical moves this offseason. If all these teams muddle through, you'll probably see all of their records about into the same point. All of them are kind of dying to need to have to kill it this offseason to separate themselves from the other. Robert Pennington, I understand you got some good news the other day, my brother. Congratulations, I heard the news. He says, everybody is sleeping on my man, Blair. Seahawks have the best medical staff, and we always come back stronger. He's going to have an epic comeback next year. Well, I love to hear it, Robert. I love to hear the enthusiasm, and I match you on that. It was one of the biggest bummers for me this season to watch him go down when he went down this year. Making a nice tackle at the time in the hole, and here comes KJ Wright to take out his knee. But I think the kid's really got some game to him. I think he can play free safety. I think he can play strong safety. We now know he can play some slot. The versatility you have with this guy at this point, the depth he adds, and then he's still a guy, remember, drafted higher than DK Metcalf. This guy was drafted in front of DK Metcalf. That's how high this team thought of him. So still a little bit of, I'm with you, Rob. I'm not sleeping on him yet, man. I'm on board the Blair train. I'm right there next to you. I'm taking the coal and I'm digging it in and I'm putting it into the burner, man. I'm getting that thing blue hot, blue flame hot, into the boiler. Team 12 says, I watched some film from Khalil Herbert. Herbert. I got to do it the French way, Team 12s. I watched some film from Khalil Herbert, pushed the pile fairly well, and was very shifty. Has some great pass blocking. Yeah, he was one of the guys I looked at last night. Let me see my notes on him. What did I have on Mr. Herbert? There it is. Oh, maybe I didn't put the notes down on him. No, there it is. He uses his angle and vision really well. He and Gainwell are really very similar in that respect. Both of those two guys are two of the secondary upper level backs. They're slicer and dicers. They do a great job of using using their field of vision to cut back, jump cutters. They use their feet really well. They're not really open field jukers or guys that as much team 12s are going to really, they don't fall great forward. They're all right. They're not your Carson type or Najee Harris or Javonte Williams. They're more looking to bust the big play, and then once you got your hands on them, they're going to usually find a way to go down at that point. But Khalil he looked good to me. I think he's probably a third-round guy. He said, if you're looking for a pro comparison, I wrote down a Frank Gore. Looks a little bit like a kind of a Frank Gore type. Not as small and low to the ground necessarily, but similar in kind of how he runs and sets up his blocks really well. Does an excellent job of running behind his blockers and setting things up. Really knows what he's doing in that respect. Yes, Nathaniel, he is from Virginia Tech. They had, I think, a tackle I was looking at, too, on that team. It was okay. What was I looking at in theirs? I think it was Christian Derishaw. Just a big technical left tackle for them. TJ says, Jags give us the first overall pick for Russ and some late picks. Sure, I would love a Lawrence on Seahawks. Yeah, TJ Emmett Brown, one of our people always in here on the chat, one of our guys, he's been on this boat big time, TJ. I mean, he's deep in the conspiracy level on this one, being that the Jaguars signed Coach Bevel to be their offensive coordinator. Now they're bringing in Schottenheimer as the passing game coordinator, knowing that Russell wasn't super happy about the firing of Schottenheimer by all accounts on what we had heard with that. So maybe there is some to this. I got to say, though, Urban Meyer's been waiting a while to jump into this fray on the pro level. And he seemingly had been, to me, in a lot of respects, waiting for that opportunity that was just the right spot. And that day that we just talked about a second ago, being that quarterbacks making the amount of money that they make and not being able to get to the Super Bowl, I think that this is a coach, coming from the college ranks, who would understand that stat and pay attention to it, allow it to hold some value for them. And the reason being is he goes, no, it's a better way to go is to go cheap. And if I've got a generational quarterback with the number one overall pick versus giving up all these draft picks to bring in this guy who's 33 years old and I'm going to have to pay all this mountain of money to, I can't see Urban pulling the trigger on that deal. I just can't. I can't see it. If it was New York with the number one overall pick, maybe, because now it's as much about a PR move and it's with the Jets in that competition with the Giants to be the team that the New York is talking about, essentially. Maybe I could make the argument for it going down like that, but hard to see Urban Meyer doing it. But interesting that he hires two former Seahawks offensive coordinators. I mean, that was an eyebrow raising for me. I think that was significant. I think he does have a lot of respect for Coach Carroll, though, too. Random McDowell says, coming out of college, who was the pro comp for Goff? It had to be Matt Ryan. I thought he had a stronger arm than Matt Ryan coming out, and he was a little bit of a bigger guy. I didn't think that he was number one, both with him and Wentz when they both came out. I was a little bit of a head scratch. It felt like one of those years in the draft where the teams at the top felt like they had to take a quarterback 1 and 2 overall because it was such a need for both teams, and they sort of talked themselves into those guys being number one overall type quarterbacks. When it comes to Goff, I would probably fit him more along the lines of, I think he's probably a little bit of a stronger arm Kirk Cousins, but he doesn't have some of the ability Cousins maybe does with, at times cutting up a defense, when he gets on a run. I don't think he's as much hot and cold like that. I think he's just kind of what he is game in and game out as a player. But, Matt Ryan, I thought he was a little stronger arm. That was the one thing you saw with Goff is he could definitely, he could spin it. And with Matt, it was always a matter of he had to play in a dome. He had to play in climate-controlled conditions in order to be able to flourish. And I think even if he went out to the Niners, I think that there's a little bit of, that would be okay for him, more warm weather environment. But I do wonder with Matt as he gets older, as we saw with Drew Brees, you get those quarterbacks that are really at their best in a dome, and now they're getting older, and they lose a little bit of that already somewhat marginal arm strength. Do you see a big, even just being a smidgen of arm strength lost, you now see a big drop off in play because of it. Ryan's not hit there yet, but I do wonder about it. Y2KH says, how long have I been on? We've been on about 2.5 hours. Jeremy Bohm says that would be funny signing Clowney for the 2021 season. It would be funny, Jeremy. It would be. The place I'd land on with it is I'd like to get this veteran pass rusher. So my prerequisites would be you get a veteran pass rusher. I don't want a young guy. I also don't want to break the bank. I don't want to be signing some guy on a 4-year, $60 million deal and putting a lot of money into the defensive line at that point. I'd like to get the 1 or 2 year deals. So that kind of pares down some of these guys. Okay. Then we get to a guy like Clowney, you look at him last year at the very end, waiting out, trying to wait for the best deal he could possibly get. He got essentially a 1 year, $9 million deal with $6 million in incentives. I would expect, not having really any production last year at that point, not doing much with that you could get him on a 2 year, $16 million deal, something like that, or even a 1 year, $8 million deal, $7 million deal. At that kind of price, I'm willing to take that risk, knowing that he is going to be going for hell trying to get that next contract. He's going to want one more contract before his career's over, and he's going to know that next year he's got to show out, having not done anything last year and coming off a 3-sack year with us 2 years ago. But that's why I kind of land on him as being a possibility. Randall McDaniel says Jason Kelce could get cut. He'd be an upgrade at center. I haven't watched him as much recently, Randall. He was a fantastic center during most of his career. The thing that I understand with him, though, being is he's like 33 years old. Are we certain that he's still playing at the same level of play at 33 coming off? And then what's his cost going to be? I don't think he's going to cost a lot, but we've got to be careful with every last ducat this offseason. And if Kelce's going to want another contract, that'll be hard to do. But I have not looked at his scores recently of what he's been on Pro Football Focus or where his rep is right now league-wide as it stands. But he would be, even if he's a little diminished, he probably is about upgrade over Posick. You're right there. I don't think I can argue with that. Y2KH says, really hoping we clear up some cap space this year, the free agent market. Side note, I love Nikola Jokic. He's a great player, Y2KH. Fun to watch, for sure. They're going to have to free up some cap space if they want to sign some guys. You're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it just by sitting pat, holding here, and we'll just use what we got. They're going to have to get creative with it. So I'd expect it to happen. It's going to have to happen. Slim God Mills, hi, go Hawks. Hey, Slim God, how you doing? Good to see you in the chat. Jeremy says Curly is cooked. Stick a fork in him. Yeah, he's done. He's done. I mean, it is what it is with it. I think he's bone on bone in his knee, and this is what was coming out of college. They kind of knew that it was going to be this way. You can't train when it's like that. It's sore a lot of the time. It's going to limit you on you getting you to your best physical state. And NFL's already tough enough, Y2H, perhaps the best strategy is to just draft quarterbacks until you get one. Try for a Super Bowl for 4 years, then trade and wait until you find the next rookie in a draft. Maybe. I think it's more of you find the rookie quarterback and then you have a defined process around that rookie quarterback in order to allow him to be successful. Be it like what the Ravens have done with Lamar Jackson. They're not thinking about Lamar Jackson 8 years down the road. They're looking at Lamar Jackson like we'll get 5 years of the best of this guy's career right now, and we'll get the most out of him. And they built the offense around him, and the run stuff and the pulling extra guards and pulling running backs to get him extra blockers in space, utilizing Lamar Jackson as a running back. That's the kind of situation I'm talking about. It could also be that you have a passer who has certain types of throws he does really well, but other stuff he may be limited in. So you build the offense in around him and get by with him, and then build the rest of your team out. I think there's a lot, if we talk about the data being not there for quarterbacks being paid top of the market and not getting back to the Super Bowl, there is a lot of data to be said about getting those players where you're able to build up the rest of the team around, and then you're able to get to the Super Bowl, and it's not as reliant on the quarterback being this game-changing player. I think that's where the NFL in a modern era is going to more move to, especially as we see these quarterbacks coming out and they're more ready to go. It used to be you have to wait for a long time to get the best out of a quarterback. Now you have guys that are almost at their top end just about right out the gate because of the way the passing concepts have been embraced on both not just the high school level, but even going down to the junior high and freaking peewee football level. Chase Stern says, what do you think about our cornerback situation? Well, it's dicey a little bit, Chase. It's dicey, okay? It's not ideal, I think are the two words I would say. I don't think you can spend money on Shaquille Griffin. I think he's limited as a player. I've not been impressed by that guy at any really point in time in his career with us. He flashes here and there in a game like once or twice, but that's about all he gives you. You got to let him walk. I think DJ Reed, despite the fact he's a 5'9" guy, which isn't in that mold of what they look for on the outside of the cornerback, Seattle's got they've got their metrics for outside cornerbacks. Thou shalt be 6 feet tall. Thou shalt have 33+ inch arms. Thou shalt run 4.5-ish 40. Thou shalt have ball skills. Thou shalt be a good tackler. They got their things that they set to. Thou shalt have 9-inch hands. They've got things that they like to gravitate towards. So he doesn't hit those spots necessarily. But I think you'll agree, from a mentality standpoint and how he plays on the football field, DJ Reed very much looks like those kind of feisty cornerbacks from the early Carroll era, the Brandon Browners, the Richard Shermans. And I'm speaking to mentality, not necessarily talent. He might be our fastest cornerback as well. I thought he showed enough last year, and the Pro Football Focus grades matched up to this as well, that he looks like a player who's earned the right to be competing at the starting role. I would expect them to lower down Trey Flowers' cap hit from $2.2 million and get it more into maybe like the 1.5 realm. He's going to be a depth guy for you and competition guy for you. But then you do probably have to address the other cornerback position at that point. You're going to need to go out there and find somebody who can fill that role. Sherman, to me, is a guy that makes a lot of sense because you don't have a lot of draft capital to get the young guy to swing him in there this year. So you go get a guy in Sherman as a certain thing who can at least play, knows the position, understands how to be, assignment correct. Probably a lot slower than he was when he was here a couple years ago. But he will still get you a couple picks, will still be a playmaker for you, will still be a certain tackler for you, and hopefully a leader. I like the thought of that as an option out there because I think it's going to be hard to find any other cornerbacks out there as real options on the outside for us. And then with 3 picks in the draft, you sure would want to have to allot one of those 3 picks to finding a starting cornerback that you're going to be relying on. I don't want to rely on drafting a Shaquille Griffin in the 3rd round this year and saying, okay, you're a number 1 outside cornerback. You're going to take on the number 1 wide receiver week in and week out. That might not work really well for me on where I would see it going. But I think our depth's a little better than some people think. I think it's not awful. It's not ideal, but it's not awful. Ugo's set at slot, one of the better slot corners I think in the league going into next year. DJ's set I think at pretty much in one of the other spots. You could shine a Sherman. You could go get a 1-year, $1 million deal for Quentin Dunbar, who's not going to make any money this offseason. So you could bring him back in the fold if you really wanted to and round that depth out. You don't necessarily have to break the bank to do it or go high in the draft to do it. You could keep the cost relatively low. Team 12s, I think CJ Verdell will be a massive bust. He can't see the hole for his life. I'll look him up. I hadn't gotten to him on my list yet, Team 12s, but CJ Verdell I will take a look at. And it's, there's some backs just don't have vision. Some do, man. When you see they don't, it sure sets out. When a running back doesn't have vision, it's like a glaring weakness. TJ says, remember last draft when you found out we drafted Brooks, Jordan effing Brooks? Yeah, it's been, this was the one thing I was very happy with TJ about us trading away our 1st round picks this year and next year is that the last 2 drafts with LJ Collier and Jordan Brooks have been me in meltdown mode, probably overreacting a little bit, but in pretty much full meltdown mode on the draft selections, just having hated them at the root core of my being. And yeah, still didn't love that. I think Jordan will eventually be a good middle linebacker for us, but the problem for me with that draft last year is I wanted to pick for the here and now. I wanted something that was going to improve the team here, like the tackle position you could have gotten, or something in that realm. And that's what most drove me crazy about it, was not necessarily just Jordan wasn't the player. Jordan's fine as a player, but just that a middle linebacker, 1st round, and a middle linebacker you're not going to play in that position for 2 years, who's going to play in the will, and who's then going to be exposed for his coverage liabilities. Yeah, that was a little bit of a brutal draft on that first pick there, TJ. Why you got to remind me about sad stuff? Nathaniel says, did you hear Wentz wants out of Philly? Yeah, these quarterbacks are sure getting chippy, aren't they? Who runs these teams? Do the quarterbacks run these teams now? Are they in charge? And I like how all these young quarterbacks go out and they sign their deals, and then they come around like a year or 2 later and go, I need to get out of here. This is just a toxic place. Like Deshaun Watson, I get it. I get why you want out. Like, I get it. It's dysfunction. They got no draft capital. They're going to be bad for years to come. Every reason to understand that. But what changed really from start of the offseason last year? Last year, it's right before the start of the year when you signed that new deal. You knew Bill Bryan was crazy. You knew he was wacky. You knew he was going to do some crazy. He'd already at that point, I think, gotten rid of the kid they sent to the Cardinals. Can't think of his name right now. They'd already got rid of Hopkins. He knew that the situation was getting kind of dire and bad, but he still signed that contract, didn't he? He didn't wait a year out to then go into this next offseason when he could have forced this trade. He still made sure he got paid, made sure this is going to be a huge cap hit to them for him to move on. And with Wentz, it's going to be a similar situation where they're going to have to take a hit here to move him out. And it's so easy for these guys to sort of spend out other teams' cap space. But it's a little bit, again, these quarterbacks are starting to kind of annoy me a little bit. They want to be paid double the next guy on the team. Then they want to have full control about where they go. And then I'm not that team. I want to go to that one. Give me that one. No, that one's bad. I want that one. Like, get off your high horse. The rest of the football players don't get to do that. It's very hard for players to force their way out of town. But all these quarterbacks, just like they get their butt hurt just a little bit, and they all turn around and they're just like, I want out. You're stupid. Bird of Prey says, Urban Meyer couldn't have hired two worse coaches. Total failure. Yeah, it's odd to say the least on that one. Bevel seems to have a reputation around the NFL that's much higher than it is with Seahawks fans. And Schottenheimer, he was going to get somewhere as some kind of passing coordinator, QB coach. That's probably his lane at this point. That's probably where he probably needs to stay. Matthias 23451, congrats on the new spot. Oh, thanks. You know me, I'm always moving around, man. I'm always bouncing from here to there and everywhere. Hopefully we get the background filled out here a little bit. Appreciate you though, man. Jay Hornsby, on a rating of between 1 and 10, excitement on our new coaches and team outlook and the group gelling together as a whole and buying into a new scheme and direction. So what is my rating on a 1 to 10? Part of it, and I don't mean to be repeating with this, Jordan Hornsby, but part of it is that I need to see this offseason, man. I need to see how it's one thing to change this scheme, but it's another thing if you don't have wide receivers, for instance, who can't block. Like, I think DK can block, but he's going to be your outside guy. The slot guy in this offense needs to be able to block. What are the moves they make to round this team out? Because I think there's moves that have to be made to be rounded out to get the excitement level up near that 10 zone. And those are the moves that we've not yet seen made. If I'm just going to do this in a vacuum, though, Jay Hornsby, and I'll just go just based on the hire of the coaching versus what I was expecting and thinking we were going to run into, because what I was expecting was to be on about a level of a 5. I was expecting Carroll to again go down that Schottenheimer road of finding a retread. Somebody that's a hire of nepotism, somebody who's got a last name that carries the weight of their father who was once a head coach in this league or a coordinator in this league. He didn't do that. So props to him because I would have been about a 5. Right now on this scale, with just as a coach and people buying in, I'm going to go 8.5, Jay Hornsby. I'll go 8.5 to 8.8. I'm in a B plus area. I'll go 8.8. Final answer. TJ, never mind on the Lawrence trade. Trade down and get Zach Wilson. Oh, TJ, are you on the Zach Wilson train? What am I missing in Zach Wilson, man? What am I missing in him? I mean, he gets to play with 25-year-old guys all around him, right? A lot of advanced guys that had a couple extra years in the weight room and stuff because half of them go on their missions there. And he's a little undersized. He doesn't blow me away. He's got a good arm. It's not an amazing arm. I feel like I'm missing something with Zach. I'm missing something completely with this guy, and I don't know what it is. I honestly don't. Randall says, I've picked the Bucs every week in the playoffs. Definitely take Tampa +3. I'd probably take the under of 56. I would too, Randall. This is a game you think on the surface of it will be a high-scoring shootout type game, but I think it will break more down into a lower-scoring game. I think both offenses are going to a degree, try to control the ball a little bit. Just a little bit. I think both coaches are going to want to eventually let it rip by the third quarter, but I think that'll depress down the score just a little bit. Matthias 23451 says, do you think Taylor will stop us from going after a defensive end in free agency? the quick answer here is it could. It could. The reason being is that you've got the 4 guys I talked about in Dunlap. They could look at that situation and say we could find some other DeMontre Moore type guy, round out that 6, and we'll be fine with going with that and call it a day. One of these guys will pop. Taylor, one of these guys is going to pop. I could see them going that route and looking at the situation that way. I hope they wouldn't, Matthias, because it would be making the same mistake that they've made for the last 2 years in the off seasons. Let's get up in my DeLorean, okay? Let's hop up into my time machine for the moment. Okay, get up to 88 miles an hour, and we're going to go back to the off season of 2019 or 18, whatever. You got guys going out the door at that time. Things are a little weak. It's kind of rough and rugged. You don't have anybody that you're really. I think Averill at that point's retired. We got nothing at defensive end. We just traded Frank Clark. What are we going to do to fix? Not only do we have to get somebody in here for Frank Clark, we got to get somebody in for the other defensive end position. Say nothing of the fact that Jaron Reed at that point was our only real viable pass rushing defensive tackle. So they get Ziggy Ansah, they get Jadeveon Clowney. Not enough. Not enough. Not even nowhere near the realm of enough. Okay, so then we go into this offseason. Once again, you go to a layman like me getting on this live stream saying, hey, we need to target a couple of key positions here, but I would target the defensive line first and foremost. You missed the boat on this last offseason. Don't miss the boat on it this offseason. And what did Seattle proceed to do? Well, they went out and bargain basement shopped, grabbing Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin and said, that'll fix it. That'll fix it. Hoping that Darrell Taylor would also come back into play, missing that one completely because his medicals, they seem to have no idea of how bad that leg was really in the shape it was in. And so then this leads them to, at the start of the season, to not only have to make a desperate move and bring Jamal Adams to buffer up the trade, but then they've got to make another trade midseason to go get a guy like Carlos Dunlap because that still wasn't enough. So 2 straight off seasons, you've made the same mistake over and over again, which has led you to have to then make desperation moves prior to the season or midseason. Maybe by this 3rd year, they get out ahead of this a little bit. And they say, rather than thinking we're good enough, why don't we operate from the mentality of we're not good enough at that position? Of attacking it like it's almost a weakness to a degree. Because then you can turn it around into a strength. And if you turn the defensive line into a strength, then you start to protect that cornerback position that we just talked about a second ago. Those guys don't have to cover for as long. Our linebackers don't have to cover for as long. You protect Jordan Brooks at the will, who's going to struggle out in coverage at times. This is the domino effect that has by putting those resources on that side of the ball. I hope they do, and I hope they're not counting on Darrell Taylor. You counted on him this year, and he gave you diddly squat. Slim Dog Mills, would you be into more play action next year? I definitely agree with running the ball more and better, but I want the team who hits the deep pass. My opinion is bring back Dorsett. Don't re-sign Moore. I'm open to bring back Dorsett on a cheap again, 1-year veteran, $1 million deal. I'm okay with that. That would be fine for me. I do think that the play action stuff is going to help Russell. I think the offense from Bevel to Schottenheimer has gone away from the under center stuff almost completely to a degree, especially off of the play action, and they've not been as effective under Schottenheimer with the play action stuff. Just that's my I don't have the stats to back this up, but just off of what I remember seeing, it seemed like last year we just completely went away from it. They got really, really falling in love with that read option look. Russell and shotgun with the running back next to him. Seems like that's where they wanted to be offensively more often than not. I think with Russell, he's never going to be a quarterback you're going to fit within a Patrick Mahomes style offense. There's too many limitations and throws that he just isn't as comfortable making that I don't know that he's suddenly going to become comfortable making by surely bringing on an offensive coordinator who's going to suddenly make him understand that he can make these throws. It'll help a little bit, but there'll all be those little tiny holes into his game. This is where the play action comes into play, and it will really benefit him, Slim Dog, because that play action is going to allow him to do the rollout, which helps out his feet, gets him further back behind the offensive line, which gets him more vision down the field and allows him to see clearer what's going on down the field. And it's bringing the defenders up, which should open up more of that space deep down the field. A lot of what the Rams offense liked to do with their offensive splits was that they would tighten them up. So offensive linemen, you'll normally have them kind of spread a certain line, but when you really want to force the defense to bring extra players in the box and kind of get them more congested down there in the middle, because that's what the Rams want to do, is they want to essentially get your defense to come down the box and congest you and then sort of wave block you. You know, you've got a wave of guys that sort of round out like fingers coming around the coral there. and then they round you out, and then they create those lanes where you have these walls of the running backs to then run through where they're just fully clear, where they've turned it into a numbers game. They've got one more defender blocking you because they're using some receiver on the back end to block the play, but they've also got the tight splits. And so when you bring all these guys in on those tight splits and what it does for the running game, when you run it off the play action, now you've got that extra defender down. That's harder to run that cover too. You're more reliant on needing to bring that safety, strong safety into the box as the eighth man, the eighth defender in the box, if not the extra guy too, which in watching some of the film on the Rams offense, you'd see teams even go up and do that. Some of that had to do, I think, with not respecting Jared Goff and his ability to throw deep. He's one of the more inaccurate deep throwers in the entire NFL. But some of that also too was what the Rams dictate to the defense with those tight splits and how they run their running game, how they try to overwhelm you with blockers, essentially. So I think that play action is going to help him a ton, Slim Dog. I think it really will. And I think Russ, if I was dead, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Russ is a little begrudging on that. Russ doesn't, quarterbacks don't want to turn their back to the defenses on those play actions more often than not. They want to be able to look at the defense constantly, see what's happening. But I'd argue that we've seen a lot of Russ looking at the defense and seeing what's happening, and it's still being very unclear for him. I think this is a thing it's like being given his vegetables. This is for your benefit, Russ. There's some nice key vitamins in this here for you, Russ. Jay Hornsby says, do you think our main concern should be the offensive line? 100%. Because I don't factor in that if Dwayne Brown plays a full year, if comes back another year, he's going to be able to play a full 16-game schedule. He's a guy who's had injuries throughout his career that tends to ding him where he might 9-10 games a year in that mode. You need a better backup left tackle than you're sitting right now with Jamarco Jones. This has got to get improved. It's got to be better than that. That's not enough. So he's a guy, and then the left guard position, Mike Iupati's done. His ankles are being held together by Elmer's glue. It's time to go get a guy that can get in there and be an upgrade over what he's been. He's been fine as a cheap veteran option. Time to get another guy like to me, Damian Lewis, or get a Joe Thuney type that's established. So I would put that at the top of my list personally, Hornsby, and I think it'll go a long way to helping out this offensive line. When you look at the Rams and offensively them in 2018 versus this year in 2020, where they were still pretty decent this year. They weren't upper level, but they were fine and decent. Probably top 15 in the league offensively this year. 2018, they were like number 2 in the league. And the main difference between those two teams, because they have a lot of the similar players on the outside as far as receivers, and yeah, they don't have Todd Gurley. Cam Akers wasn't bad for him this year, but the big difference really is offensive line play and the talent that they had the offensive line in that Super Bowl running season versus now. If they can use that lesson, and I hope Waldron is telling Carroll this as he comes in the door, you've got to put the resources in your offensive line. You can't treat it like the redheaded stepchild of your team. Jose, you have a good night, man. I do appreciate you, brother. Byron Schmidt says, what player or position do you see us realistically targeting in the draft? Because Pete and John like to reach. I don't have enough of a long list with them doing it. I could see them on a guy like this Javonte Williams from UNC, who's very Marshawn Lynch-like, with Carroll falling in love with them and vaunting up into the second round and giving future draft capital in order to get up there in order to be able to then, sorry, I got a kid outside screaming, in order to then be able to get up and go get him, because he might go early second round and they might fall in love with him. He'd be the reachy guy that I would probably say as much as anybody that they might look at. But I've got to look at more of these guys. I got to look at more of these kind of players that we've got out there, Byron. I'm going to be diving in after the live stream show tonight, looking at more stuff. We got a couple names on my list here that you guys have provided me. So I'm fully embedded in now, looking at these prospects, and I'll get deeper and deeper with each live stream show. I'll have more of a breadth of these guys as I'm looking at them. But nobody yet off the top of my head, and it's hard to know reach for because they're not picking in the first round. That's been their reach spot. They're going to be picking midway to the back end of the second round as we're sitting right now. And it's really hard to predict what you got, who you're going for at that point. That's deep into the draft at that spot. All right, bro, I'm out of here. Matthias, 23451, have a good night, TJ. Matthias says, who do you predict we draft with our 3 draft picks right now? Okay, so I'll just go out on a limb here. Let's go with the left guard. Take your best left guard that's on the board for you in the second round. Seattle just decided we're going to build up our offensive line in the second round. Then in the third round, I'm going to say that they're going to go for it's an interesting one. Third round. Who do you go for in the third round? All right, let me see here. So let's just do 2 offensive line. What's wrong with that? You know, let's go Eichenberg. He might be a first. He's probably a first. I haven't gotten to the low end rounds on the other guys. I'll need to look at more of the prospects to give you a full three round deal for who we might look at with that. But I like the guards we got. The belly shirt guy from the Senior Bowl looked good. There's another guy that people are mocking to us who looks really good. I would be ecstatic if we grab a left guard in the second round. I would be absolutely standing up and clapping. I would love it. Love it. Matthias, what offensive line moves would excite you? I would certainly be excited because I think that the Dwayne Brown situation is coming sooner than later. It would be exciting to me if he retires and they could go get a veteran guy like Alejandro Villanueva or a Cam Robinson that you can get in, something that we've got now the future of the left tackle position a little bit more solidified. Joe Thuney, signing him as a left guard, that would get me probably pretty excited. I think he does fit personnel-wise as far as being more of the mobile guy that this new coach will probably look for in the offensive lineman. Recently, Seattle's been looking for more of the bigger, strong, you have to run around a continent to get around them type offensive linemen. Your DJ Fluker types, for instance, or Damian Lewis, just as wide as they are tall. But something like that. It's really less to do with Matthias, with the exact player you establish here, as much as it is about allocating the resources for the position. They've just not been as willing sometimes to allocate. They've gotten better over recent years, but they haven't been as always awesome at allocating those resources to really turn the offensive line into a strength. And that's what it takes is allocation. Whether it be the second round pick you use on offensive lineman, then you sign a prime guy out in free agency. It's just about really putting those eggs in that basket and understanding the value that's built within that. It's something I go back to again and again. That's cliche football. I mean, this goes back into the 50s. It's won in the trenches. The game's won in the trenches. Oh, it's great to have the fancy running backs and fancy receivers, fancy defensive backs. But at the end of the day, the game is still won in the trenches, and I still believe that. We lost that Rams playoff game because we got our butt beat in the trenches on both sides of the football. Certainly having a predictable game plan didn't help, but you couldn't block anybody. And they were able to run the ball down your throat. I still will always come back to, and especially on a team like ours, which is built simplistically on both sides of the ball, well, all the more need at that point to get the prime talent. All that more need then to invest specifically on those spots of your football team. And I think that's been places the last especially 2 years, they just haven't spent as much time really concentrating on. They've been relying on these young players to kind of pop and come along, and the young guys really have not come along. Nathaniel Parks, what about that USC receiver? Would he be any good? I watched a little bit of tape of him last night. Nathaniel, he's all right. He's all right. I think I liked Pittman more last year coming out. But he's an exciting guy. He's got some good after the catch ability. He's interesting. I got to watch a little more tape on him. Y2KH, I feel we're trading someone for picks. Lockett is an easy candidate, but who else might we see traded? No way Schneider is okay with 3 picks. Jaron Reed, perhaps Diggs. Not many tradable guys, I feel. No, it's here's your list. I'll give you your list right now, actually, in regards to this. There are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 guys that you could essentially move off from, free up some space from, clear up some cap space. The first guy is Dwayne Brown. If you were to trade Dwayne Brown, if you release Dwayne Brown, that would save you $11 million. Tyler Lockett would save you 10. Quandary Diggs would save you 5. Bobby Wagner would save you 10. Jaron Reed really only saves you about $8.5 million. Now, that's not a bad chunk of change. You could get a lot with that $8.5 million. But to me, the key is for weakening then the 3-tech defensive tackle position on your team, are you getting an equivalent player for that much more of a cheaper cost and then able to use the extra resources somewhere else? Because you need to be able to find an equivalent 3-tech at that point, in my opinion. Because really, when I look at Brian Monet and Poona Ford, to me, they're more of your 1-techers. They're more of your run stuffers than they really are pass rushers. Monet's pretty good at it. He's all right. He can do a little bit of the 3-tech stuff. But to me, Jaron Reed's a little bit of a head and shoulders above him as a pass rusher goes. So that's the only part where I'd be hesitant with Jaron Reed. But to me, Wagner, Lockett, and Diggs are three guys that, I'm open to doing it if I can understand what moves. It makes sense to me why you would move off for them to clear that cap space. As the reasons that you spoke to. There's just not a lot of other guys you have options for on this. The decision gets actually really simple for you really quick because you just don't have, 10 different guys you're picking. You got to pick 3 of them to cut through. No, you got 5, and you're going to pick like 2 of them. And chances are you can't just stay pat with all of them and just let the roster ride out. D-Boy! Hello, D-Boy. How you doing, man? Coming at the end. D-Boy, I got my new schedule up. I hope you saw that. So we'll be doing 2 streams a week now. We'll be up a lot more and more consistent timeline-wise. But I agree, Y2K. I do think we're going to move out. We got to get some more picks. Schneider does not want to sit with 3 draft picks. He's trading back as it is probably already, but I think he wants to get even more above that. D-Boy says, I don't know why, but I'm not getting notifications when you're on. This is BS. All the more reason why I just posted my schedule on the community board, D-Boy. Also got it up on my Twitter page. So I'll be doing these kind of more consistently. We'll be doing more of them, and then hopefully that'll get around some of that. I've heard that with the notifications. YouTube's just weird like that. As well as I think the problem, D-Boy, is I'm not doing them straight. I'm not doing this live stream just straight through YouTube. I'm going through Streamlabs OBS. And so I think there's something in the mechanism of going through OBS and pushing it out where it doesn't send the notifications for whatever reason. It's good to have you in the chat. Glad we could catch you at least here a little bit at the end. Kernet Uptime. How you doing, Kernet? Who honestly wanted to see this Super Bowl matchup? I'm relatively excited by it. I would have been probably more excited by a Buffalo Bill Packer Super Bowl if I can have my Seahawks, and then the Bills beating the Packer. Would have been cool to see the Bills win it, and they seem to have kind of that mojo going this year where it might have been their year. Sure, it's going to be hard to watch Tom Brady raise the trophy again, though. Man, am I done with that? I can't believe that guy in his career. He's amazed me, man. He's amazed me. I thought he was really going to be. I did not think he was still going to be able to play where he's playing now. I thought Tampa Bay was going to be good this year. People were hammering me in the chat this year going, oh, just because Tom's there, you thinking they're... No, I think they're going to be legitimate. They got a really good team, but surprising to see him take them back to the mountaintop again this year, Kernet. Really is. It blows me away he was able to do it, especially within Arians, and Arians being so hard-headed through most of this year where Arians was just going to run his offense as he's running it. This was not the Peyton Manning going to Denver situation where Peyton said, hey, Peyton, come aboard here and we'll build our whole offense around whatever you want to do. We'll just implement the Indianapolis Colts offense into the Denver Broncos offense now. And I thought they would do the same with Tom, bring him to Tampa Bay. But Arians, with his 7-step drops and no risk it, no biscuit type mentality as an offensive coach, said, nope, we're going down the field deep. We're going to still throw deep. And Tom did what he could with it. I think he eventually relinquished that a little bit and dialed it back just a hair. But yeah, it's good job by Tom to still fit within that. Tutu Atwell. I do not know a lot about Tutu Atwell, Team 12, so I apologize, but I am adding him to my list somewhere. Tutu Atwell. I think I watched him a little bit, but I don't have enough. I don't remember enough of what I saw on him. So sorry I don't know anything on him yet, but I will dive on in, man. I will dive on in. He's fast. I'll take a peek. Darren West, dude, we all forget that we signed Chance Warmack. Do you think he could be the answer at left guard? Probably not Darren West. He's a guy that did opt out this year with the COVID situation. I would wonder how much he really wants to play anymore. Having opted out like he did, granted he wasn't going to be paid a whole lot of money this year to play. He's a guy with a lot of talent, top 10 first-round pick overall, got all the physical tools you could want. He's a mauler-type guy. I think he's more of a right guard, Darren, than he is a left guard. I think he struggles with some of the pass protection stuff. He's not going to take over for Damian Lewis. I mean, this is a little bit, Darren, of the concept of why I don't think Brandon Scherff was really going to be a target here for Seattle. Because between Brandon and Damian Lewis, one of those guys is going to have to move to left guard. And I don't know who you're going to ask to do that. But he's not under contract anymore as well, Darren. We'd still have to go back out and re-sign him. He's not going to be a free agent after this year. I don't think you control any rights to him. Maybe you still do have that 1-year deal on point. Now, maybe you would. Yeah, maybe you would because he opted out. So essentially his contract he didn't get paid for his contract. So I think he would be on, I don't know. That's such a weird area of things. I got to look up into that a little bit. But he was due to be more of a reclamation project when they signed him. Nobody had any real expectation. It was more of a hope. And I just don't put enough into that where a guy's been a first-round bust through most of his career, never really played great. Now he's going to suddenly turn on at this point in time. Maybe. Kernett, the Oilers and Titans were idiots for trading Steve Largent to us. Well, it's all about situations, Kernett. So dig this, Kernett, okay? We're gonna go to Wade Phillips' daddy's head right now. Old Bum Phillips, okay? You're Bum Phillips. And now you're arriving here now at the Houston Oilers team. I'm on the Houston Oilers. I'm the head coach of the Houston Oilers. We're going to be good. We're the Oilers. We're from Houston, and we're good. Now, Bum is a run-centric guy, okay? He is run-centric. Think like Pete Carroll, but even more extreme, okay? So Bum wants to run the football. Bum does not want to throw the football. And when you look at that year that Largent came out, he's a fourth-round pick for the Oilers, Titans. He's a fourth-round pick for him. He comes in there and he's not showing out. At the time, his dad, I think, had passed on, and he's watching over 12 siblings. He's half awake, can't get any sleep at night because he's trying to do all these things to help out his family as he's trying to make the football team. And the two parts that really were up against Largent at that time were, number one, you had Bum Phillips coming in there who wanted to run the football and wasn't really interested in throwing the ball anyway. Number two, Houston already had two legitimate wide receivers on that football team. Billy White Shoes Johnson was still right at the end of his prime. He was their number one guy, a really good wide receiver at that point in time. And then they had another guy who had just made the Pro Bowl on the prior year. So Largent was going to have to outshine those guys to get any kind of playing time. And frankly, if he had remained on Houston, if he had made the team, in the NFL, a lot of it is about opportunity and timing. It's not always about just having the skill set or the talent. It's about being in the right situation. And Largent went from a situation where he was not going to get any opportunities on a run-centric team to going to now a young, fledgling expansion team where he was going to get all the opportunities in the world to kind of shine. So the trade certainly made sense from a Seattle standpoint, but I just don't think Kernett, he was ever going to find his way to being on the Oilers team, being that he never showed out in preseason, even when he arrived here in Seattle. He was dropping balls. He didn't look very good. The reason he made the team was Jerry Rome, his college head coach, was now the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks and went to bat for Largent. Said, hey, don't cut him. Don't cut him. Just trust me with this guy. Trust me with this guy. And it wasn't until literally the first game of the year when Largent did his trademark Superman-style catch in the Kingdom, catching a 50-yarder from Zorn, that he finally kind of went open some eyeballs and be like, whoa, well, the kid can play. That was literally almost like the first moment between the Oilers camp and the Seahawks camp where he really showed what eventually he could potentially eventually be. H. Letty, do you think they should bring in John Ross, high potential with low risk? For exactly the reasons you mentioned, Letty. Exactly the reasons you mentioned. Low cost, low risk, all upside. I love those kind of moves. There's nothing to be lost with that. You can cut him at any time if he's still not, if there's rumors about work ethic, if he's not doing this, not doing that. But he played University of Washington. There's some local connection roots here. Seattle's certainly going to be pretty familiar with him as a player. I would expect that would be something that they could potentially look at, and I'd be really in favor of it. I'd be very interested in finding a way to see if you could utilize him one way or another. Even just those end-around sweeps. Use that 4-2 speed on those end-arounds, man. Are we lagging a little bit? Y2KH says maybe we get Le'Veon Bell on the cheap. Boy, he looks done, though, Y2K. It seems like that year off that he took has robbed him a little bit. And it's hard to take a year off in football. It's been said before, and I've seen this before, where guys take a year off and they're not the same player when they come back. Sometimes it helps and you're able to heal your body up and get right. Sometimes you come back a little bit more diminished than what you once were. Matthias says, what free agents moves do you see us making? Yeah, so I look at, I think they'll target a tight end somewhere, Jonnu Smith, or trade for David Njoku. I think, who are my other guys I was looking at? I like a Jadeveon Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue type move as well. Somebody mentioned moving on Jaron Reed. Like, if you can move Jaron Reed his $8.6 million and bring in a guy like Ndamukong Suh for a 1-year, $6 million deal, I might do something like that. He's another free agent out there. Boy, that'd be interesting. I might look at a guy like T.Y. Hilton. If you can get him at like half, I think somebody's going to probably pay him, but if you get him at a significantly reduced rate from what Lockett was going to make, I think that'd be another way. It'd be a lot like the Ndamukong Suh move. You're moving off from one guy, paying him at the top of the market, getting another player who's very close in value while reducing down the salary by nearly potentially half, if not 40%. That's the way you can save money at certain spots to then get another extra player down the line. So I'd like to see them move in more of that realm. The most bang for the buck essentially is what you need to do in this particular offseason. That's the name of the game in free agency, because you got a pretty big free agent market to begin with. And then you're going to have a secondary, like a second wave coming over the top of the first wave. All of those teams trying to pare down their cap situation, releasing a whole bunch of players onto the market. Those players, then you're able to get pennies on the dollar. I'd like to see them move in that realm of things. And H. Letty, yes, we should trade Lockett. You save $10 million. You're not going to sign him to a contract extension. He's due a contract extension. You could probably get the most value you could ever get for Lockett right now, being probably even a second-round pick. I would prefer doing that at this point. The key on this to me, the real lockdown reason at the end of the day, there's a couple of reasons initially: no contract extension, DK coming up for a new contract, I got a couple, but the real final reason on this is that the Rams offense asks its receivers to block. Specifically, it asks its slot receivers to sometimes come down there and put their grill right into a defensive end's chest. And that's not an easy task to do. A guy like Lockett, who's about 5'9", about 180 pounds, I don't think that he can do that. I think they're going to have to get a little bit bigger at wide receiver, specifically at the slot position, to potentially pull that off. So just all of those factors kind of come into play at that point for Letty, where it goes, okay, you just got to move on. Nathaniel says, a reach for a guy like Diablo out of Virginia Tech. Looks like Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas hybrid potential. I'd look at him like late sixth, low floor, high ceiling. Might have to take a flyer on him. He looks interesting, man. He looks just like Cam Chancellor, doesn't he, Nathaniel? With that Virginia Tech uniform and wearing that number 17 like he does. Looks very, very similar to Cam. He's out there laying wood on guys. And Jesus, if there's a guy that you want to draft just for his name alone, the guy's got the best name in the draft. Like he wins on the name alone. But yeah, hey, you did well with it before at one point or another with Cam, going in that realm. And I certainly would take a look at him for sure if you're able to get him down that far in the draft too. Spud Homer, how likely is it that we kick the tires on Richard Emmanuel Landis Sherman? I would say it's a high likelihood. I don't know what the market's going to be like from Spud. That's the thing, is if you get into a competition, I don't think Seattle's going to get into a bidding war for Richard Sherman's services at this point in time in his career. But if you can get him back on a cheap 1-2 year deal, I think they would really look at that, because they're looking at Shaquille Griffin at the money he's making, and I think they still view Richard Sherman as a superior player to Shaquille Griffin. And if they can get him as a superior player, less years, but maybe for the same kind of money yearly that Shaquille might get, that might make more sense for Seattle. And it would make more sense from my standpoint. I'd rather go that route. H. Letty says, will Penny be the lead back, or we sign someone else? I think we will sign or draft someone else, Letty. I do. But I think that it's his job to lose right now. He's got more talent than any other backs we have on the roster. It's not a certainty that you're able to add a talented player who's going to be able to compete with him. I don't think you're going to be able to go out and even do a 1-year, $4 million deal like you did for Hyde this year and getting an equivalent player like that. Maybe a guy like Fournette you could slide in there somehow or another, but he certainly right now looks like to me the guy, and especially because he's going to fit to this scheme, right? The Rams like to do a lot more of the outside stuff that works more into Rashad Penny's game. He likes getting out on those edges and then using that speed to get upfield. So I think he's going to be a good fit for this offense, and I think he's the front runner to be your lead back. D-Boy says, if we go after anybody on the offensive side of the ball in the draft, what position would you be okay with us getting, not counting the O-line? If we go after anybody on the offensive side of the ball in the draft, what position would you be okay with? I would go with the move I've gone to in my head, D-Boy, is you move out Lockett. You get a mid-second round pick for him, and then the receiver I look at, go watch some tape on this kid, D-Boy. He's fun to watch. That's why I'm telling you to watch him. You'll like this guy. And that's Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney out of Florida. I would draft him then in the second round at that point. That would be a guy I would look at targeting, because then you flipped out Lockett, brought a guy into Kadarius Toney as a second rounder, who I think could get you about 90% of what you get out of Lockett, and he's going to cost about 1/12 of the cost next season to do that instead. I think that would be a better move to make, in my opinion. Outside of that, if we're not talking offensive line, then obviously I think running back. I could see them going out and getting, where they sit in that second round, D-boy, there's that Javonte Williams guy that looks just like Marshawn, and that's right about where he's going to fall to, because he's going to go at his pro day and run like a 4.55 40 on his pro day. And that's while guys like Gainwell is going to run probably like a 4.4, Chuba Hubbard's going to run like a 4.38, Khalil run a 4.4. So he's going to be a guy who's going to look as being really slow, or they're going to always slow, but he's just like Marshawn, great quickness, a grinder, pulls the file forward, pushes the pile forward, runs behind his pads, low center of gravity, great vision. So he would be a guy that they would target too. So those would be my two guys, I think, off the top of my head. If I have to go for two positions, in that second round specifically, they'd look for, because I think they're going offense with that first pick. We've done defense for the first pick over the last couple of years. Dark Right says we're going to the Super Bowl. We'll see, man. You got to see how the offseason goes, man. We got to see how this offseason goes. Leroy Estevan. How you doing, Leroy? I am doing amazing. Having a great stream today, man. The chat's been awesome, but they're always awesome. Jay Hornsby says, thanks, bro, for all you do in this channel. Go Hawks, and thanks for answering all my questions. I'm out. Hey, you have a good one, Jay Hornsby. It's my pleasure, man. Love having you in here. Dill Pickle Turtle. I love your content, dude. Thank you, Dill Pickle. I appreciate you, man. I love your username, man. That's a great little handle you got there. But thanks for watching. Appreciate all you guys. D-Boy, I don't like both teams in the Super Bowl, but I think I want Tampa Bay to win because of Mike Evans, but I don't think Tom has enough in the gas tank to pull it off. Could be. It's hard to see against this juggernaut that's the Chiefs, isn't it, D-Boy? I mean, they're playing maybe their best football of the year at the right time of year. They had to go through some tough teams to get to the Super Bowl, which, look, the Buccaneers did relatively as well. All the factors, all the arrows would point kind of to the Chiefs with this. Boy, you never want to bet against Tom Brady, do you? You never want to, and especially what he's done this year. I do go back to, in my mind, D-Boy, the key as it's been with Tampa Bay, and I said this, I said this going back to last offseason when I was really hyping up Tampa Bay. It comes down to me, their defense. Their defense and what I think that defense can do to the Chiefs. They've got a fantastic front seven, two amazing linebackers. And this year, the hole in that team was supposed to be the secondary. The hole was supposed to be where you could attack them and run up the scoreboard is in that secondary. And it's been the part that's come together this offseason. I really think it's going to give the Chiefs a little bit of problems. I think they'll still be able to score a little bit, but I think it could be enough to push them through. I'm still going to lean on it being Tampa Bay, though, D-Boy. It's maybe my gut instinct on this one. Maybe I just don't. I picked against Tom too many times, and I fooled me once. Shame on me. Fool me twice. Shame on. You can't fool me again. But I'll go with Tampa Bay on this one, man. Go with Tampa Bay. Y2KH, if we could draft two, could we possibly tag Griffin and trade him to like the Texans or something? No, when you do the franchise tag, you've got to have the cap space available to be able to pay the franchise tag. And if I'm not mistaken, the cornerback franchise tag is going to cost you probably in the neighborhood of about $15 million per year. $15 million per year. So right now, I don't think we've got $15 million in cap space as we stand right now. That's the first impediment to that problem. The other thing is that no team's going to make that trade because every team knows that you're not going to keep him on the franchise tag. So you're not going to have a lot of value in trading him at that point. And I think that at the end of the day, no one's really going to bite necessarily on that trade. Who's going to want to pay 1 year, $15 million to Shaquille Griffin with him having that leverage over the top of him, with him trying to hold them over the barrel to signing him to a new deal? Well, don't sign me a new deal. I'll play my 1 year out on my $15 million and go back into free agency next year when the cap raises. I could see Shaquille doing that. So it just doesn't, there's no place where it makes any sense to me that they would be able to pull that off. And the kicker on this being Y2KH, the Seattle Seahawks front office over the last 10 years does not use the franchise tag really. They did on Frank Clark, and I think they did on a kicker. Other than that, they just don't tend to use it. They don't like to utilize that, and I think it has to do with not trying to piss the player off. Matthias 23451, I feel very confident in this new offensive coordinator. I mean, nobody knew how good Andy Reid would be when he switched from quarterback coach. I think he's going to surprise us fans with a potent, dynamic offense. Al, the Rams, we were hearing scuttlebutt from the Rams organization that this was going to be a major loss when they lost Waldron. They said, this is going to hurt. And, I'm okay with taking this risk, Matthias. I certainly like this a lot more than the retread, don't you? Certainly like this a lot more than the nepotism hire, or the safe hire. Give me the move with the high boomer bust potential. Save your stuff for someone else. Go for it. Be aggressive. And we're going for a guy with a lot of potential as an offensive coordinator. Also could flame out. Also might not be as competent as Schottenheimer. But that's the risk we took, and I'm fine with that risk. And I'm glad they did it. Solid point, though, Matthias. You also asked, who do you see us trading Tyler to, and for what in return? Don't have a team necessarily that jumps out the top of my head. Let's just for the sake of it, let's go with the Chicago Bears. And you flip it for a second-round pick. Or if we look at maybe a playoff team. If you're looking at a playoff team this year, I'm trying to go through my mind here on teams that you could look at. Probably not them, probably more offense. Like the Bills. Would the Bills look at him as an upgrade over Cole Beasley, maybe? I don't have necessarily a team off the top of my head, but just I would look more second. I think you would get maybe a late second rounder. But I think you could at least get a second rounder for him. Friesen Hip Hop. How you doing, Friesen? Friesen loves himself some Chubba Hubbard. He's got some great names in this draft, isn't there, Friesen? Chubba Hubbard, I hope we take him. He is going to be by far the hardest running back to evaluate in this draft. Absolutely ridiculously hard to evaluate. This guy is a home run hitter, chicks dig the long ball type running back. And I mean to the extreme degree. Not a guy with a lot of jukey moves or really a guy that's going to drag piles forward or do any of that. He's a very slight build guy, almost looks like a receiver a little bit. But when he gets into the open field, he's got a top-end gear like no other. I would imagine in his pro day, he's going to run probably somewhere in the 4.33 range on his pro day. He is legitimately fast. Will be one of the fastest running backs in the league from the jump, the second he arrives. Is he going to be able to be effective, though? He's got like I said, slight build, a very upright running style. Doesn't run very well behind his pads. Not the greatest of vision, but when he finds a crack, when he finds a hole, he's gone. He's gone. So I like him. He's a fun guy to watch, Friesen. I mean, he's a fun running back to watch for sure. No doubt about that. He's been one of the funnest ones to watch just for how fast he is. Guys do not catch him from behind. He runs away from everybody. Friesen says Chubb's draft stock is dropping, so he should go later now. I can see why. There's limitations to his game, Friesen. He's got that one thing he does really well. I mean, he does it as good as any player. I haven't seen a running back whose game is so wholly built around speed but has this special of speed for the running back position in a long time. I can't really think of a guy in recent memory that even is close to what this guy, how he runs the football. Just an interesting prospect in that respect, but harder as well because of that to then, where is his value? Where should he be picked? What is the right spot? To me, he looks like, in looking at him, to me, he's a fourth to even as far as sixth round guy, though. He's got a wide, it's going to take a team falling in love with him. But I know why you like him. I like him too. The Hawk Pryor. We're never going back to the Super Bowl with this squad. Too many podcasts. Good man brand and other garbage endeavors are distancing Mr. Unlimited. I'm with you on that in that respect, Hawk Pryor. I think this offseason Russell's got to dial back into really getting back into being committed with football. And specifically, I would argue with Russell, it is less to do with necessarily what he's got to do physically as much as what he's got to do mentally. He's got to take it up a notch mentally speaking in his game as the quarterback. He's got to get the kind of control and mastery that we see normally of quarterbacks who've been in the league for 10 years. That seems to be a little bit missing from his game from time to time. I think Hawk Pryor, this new offensive coordinator, is going to bring him a little bit more further along in that respect, and that will be the key to maybe our growth and our top end about where our team will eventually be able to go as we move forward. But I know why you have the pessimism that you do. It's been 5 years of this playing out in the same way, and we've not seen anything that has been a phenomenal change to make us expect this is suddenly going to go in a different direction. So I will never knock those folks like yourself out there that are a little bit pessimistic that this thing can get turned around. I would still offer that in the NFL, with the swings that you can get, off-season to off-season with the parity in the league, that if you kill an off-season, if you make the right moves, if you do things just right, that you can change your fortunes. I've referenced this back even recently where you have the 49ers who are the last of the division, worst football team in the league. Hadn't done nothing since Harbaugh left. And granted, they stacked a lot of high first-round picks to build up that talent finally, but then Shanahan comes into place, they round out a draft, they kill an off-season, and suddenly they go from one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NFL, to getting to the Super Bowl. If they can make that kind of wide move in one off-season, why can't Seattle make a similar move, being as consistently a winner as they have, to getting to being a Super Bowl contender? They can do it. Will they? I don't know. We will have to see how this all plays out and if they make the moves they need to make. I certainly would say, at least Hawk Pryor, it was a step in the right direction by signing this offensive coordinator, and that this offensive coordinator hire was a step in the right place into getting to that spot. Hawk Pryor also says, I'm afraid there's going to be a mutiny within the Seahawks organization if Russ continues to regress. If he doesn't ascend this coming year, it's time to destroy and rebuild. I am in agreement with you here. If we play out again this year like we played out this year and we get to a same place or a lower level than what we had this last offseason, it's going to be time at that point to move on from Russ, and it's going to be at that time the point to reevaluate how you're putting this team together and what we need to do, especially in this division where everybody's right now ready to compete and ready to push forward. If you're not there, if you're lacking in certain spots like that have consistently continued to show up year after year after year, then you do need to do something at that point. So I think it's going to be so stark by that point prior that they'll have to, that there's not going to be an option of just, doing the cover our eyes and cover our ears and we'll just keep plodding forward approach. I think certainly, at least from Russell's standpoint, he'll want to probably push forward at that point. And then that next year being a key spot where this year it costs you $7 million if you were to trade Russ. Next year you actually start to save money by moving off from him. Kay, how you doing, Kay? He says, what do you think about Dunlap's pricey contract? Well, $14 million a year hurts, and that's a hit. With that said, he was probably the most consistent and best pass rusher in the NFL in the back 8 games of the league. I'm going to lean back to saying that, money well spent at this point. We need more certainty on that defensive end position, defensive line position. More guys that we know what we're going to get out of them. Don't know what I'm getting out of Alton Robinson next year. Don't know what I'm getting out of LJ Collier next year. Don't know what I'm getting out of Rasheem Green next year. God only knows what we're going to get out of Darrell Taylor next year. I need some certain bets. And if I've got to pay $14 million to get that certain bet, so be it. I think the thing that would be nice to do with this K, the ideal situation to do with this K, would be to get him onto a 2-year deal, where even if you're not planning on having him around on the second year of the deal at that point, you spread out that cap hit over the 2 seasons. That's probably the ideal to what we'd like to see here, and I would imagine that they will try to do something like that with Dunlap. Dunlap is a dark horse trade, maybe. Yeah, I don't know if I can see it. The problems that we've had with rushing the passer over the last couple of years, and now you finally get a pass rusher in here who not only is good at rushing the passer, but was one of the top pass rushers in the entire NFL throughout the last half of the schedule. I don't know why you would consider moving on from that at that point. I know that it's a big cap hit to take, and I know you could get out basically, I think $10 million you could get out if you moved off of him. But he's such a vital component that you don't have currently on this team as we stand right now. Y2K says trading the lab or Team 12s. I think Chuba Hubbard would be perfect for the Steelers. He could, yeah, I could see that. They've got more of the man-on-man blocking scheme rather than the zone blocking scheme. So with Hubbard, I want him to go to a man-on-man blocking scheme. Zone blocking scheme in just basic tenets here is the one that's supposed to get you the 3 yards and cloud of dust every time. It's supposed to limit the amount of negative plays and penetration because you have more combo blocking going on. Well, with man-on-man blocking schemes, now you're opening the holes up bigger. You're getting more. If everybody can win their fight, win their battle singularly, now you've got guys getting to the second level on linebackers because you're not having to combo block as much. Now you're getting bigger plays busted off. Think like the Seahawks in 2005 were man-on-man blocking scheme. They weren't a zone blocking scheme. So they're just able to open up those holes because you had the Walter Jones and the Hutchinsons and the Chris Grays and all of that, Locklears. So I think that he would be a good fit for that respect. He's got to go to probably more of a man-on-man scheme. I don't know if he would be as good in zone, especially with zone relying so much on you making the right read. He's a guy who you just want to tell him where to go and get there fast. Y2KH, who are your 3 tech free agents? Sign a $3 million older guy, 1-year deal, trade Reed and a pick, use it to draft a 3 tech. I like your idea. I know where you're coming from. Certainly part of the thought process that I've been trying to operate from on this. Man, do I not have defensive tackles written down? I really don't have defensive tackles written down. I guess the one guy that I would, a couple of guys I would look at with what you're talking about with that would be Ndamukong Suh. I would expect him to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of a 1-year, $5 million deal. He's been signing 1-year prove-it deals for a while now. He'd be a guy that I would take a look at on that. Seattle's flirted with him in the past. He would be cheaper, I think, than what Jaron Reed's going to cost you next year. Sheldon Rankins, as a guy at the New Orleans Saints, never really performed up to his first-round billing status, but who's still been a really solid 3 tech for them. He'd be a guy I might take a look at. I think Corey Peters is more of a 3-4 guy, but he could be a guy that you do take a look at as well with that. But I don't have a lot of other 3 tech guys on my list right now. I'll have to look a little deeper into that. I don't think I saw a lot of options out there, Y2KH. Kay says, I don't trust Ken Norton. I don't trust him either, really. But, Carroll trusts him. And unfortunately, Ken, he did enough at the end of the back half of those 8 games to keep himself here, employed for at least another year, I would expect. So I don't think Ken's going anywhere at this point. He's just going to kind of hang around, at least for another season. But I agree with you. He does not elicit a lot of excitement from me. I'm not a big Norton guy. Nathaniel Park says Ken Norton didn't change a whole lot. He got better players, so that made him look better, I think. I think you're onto something there, Nathaniel. I mean, at the end of the day, this scheme is going to be reliant on the talent of players out on the football field. This is a simplistic scheme. This is not a scheme that is going to trick you defensively. This is not, you think you see this coming, and then we're going to send you this way. You pretty much show them what it's going to be. You're running cover 3, single high safety a majority amount of the time. That's what Seattle wants to do. So in that, you need the front 4 that can get pressure without having to blitz. You need the guys that can stay assignment correct in their zones. So when you've got the upgraded players and Jamal Adams comes back from injury, when you add a Carlos Dunlap back in a set, now you've upgraded the talent out there on the field. Now they suddenly start looking a little bit better. I think it also helped that we also played Nathaniel a little bit lesser competition on the offensive side of the ball in the second half of the schedule, specifically a couple of backup quarterbacks and ailing quarterbacks throughout that time. The Hawk Pryor, thank you for the $5 donation, brother. I salute you, sir. Double salute, double salute, double salute. Thank you so much. He says, love all your streams, brother. Best on YouTube. Oh, man, that's high praise, Hawk Pryor. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you. Yami says, talking about bets, should we pursue Clowney if he's on the market? I'm pursuing Clowney, but only if he's got his head wrapped around what his true value is at this point, which is he's going to need to be on a prove-it deal. He's a guy did not get it done last year. He had concerns about his knee going into last year, and then he had a knee problem. That's not going to net him a lot out on the open market. I would expect him to sign something in the neighborhood of a 1 or 2 year deal, another prove-it deal. And last year he really got, I think, a pretty big contract at the end of the day from the Tennessee Titans, being that 1 year, $9 million, $9 million deal with up to $15 million in incentives. I think that was pretty good considering his market had really dropped out on him last year before that point. I'd expect for him to probably be in the neighborhood of like a 2 year, $16 million deal. And that gets me excited, Yami. Being able to bring on Jadeveon on a low end deal like that, not a lot of years, not a lot of guaranteed money, prove it type deals. I love prove it deals for NFL players. I think when they tend to get paid, they dial their foot off the gas just a little bit. They're not hitting that NOS button anymore. You know what I mean? They downshift into 4th gear a little bit. I think you get them on the prove it deal. They're hungry. They're fighting. The tenacity is up a little bit more. So I would like to see it from that respect. I would. Kay says, what's going to happen to Earl Thomas? Oh, as Yami says right below you there, Kay, my instinct on this does seem to be that his career is over. It was telling last year when you had a Houston Texans team that had certainly gone all in for this year, trade all those draft picks away. They were trying to go for it. Their defense desperately needed help. Their defense was just in awful shape. They were due to bring Earl Thomas in there, but then there was a team meeting where they all voted on bringing Earl Thomas in here because his reputation had carried such bad, toxic weight that it was essentially the coaches going to the players going, okay, we know this guy's a little bit of a problem child, but you guys want to have him in here. And then them voting him out. He just seems to have kind of one of those personality types that that rubs people a little bit the wrong way. And I've heard some stories of him now recently, things that have come out about him just in kind of the way he goes about his business and stuff. And I just think unless he's eaten some big time humble pie this offseason, probably done. And it's sad to see because he's 1 year away, really. He's one more Pro Bowl year away from being probably more of a lock in the Hall of Fame. But as it stands now, because of these reputational concerns, he's not going to get in there now. I mean, this is probably going to end up costing him. And that's sad to see. It's sad to see. Richard Sherman might be the only Legion of Boom era member that ends up making the Hall of Fame for us. Bobby Wagner, too. Bobby will make it. But you only get 2 off of a team that was so good. So good. Kind of disappointing. Kind of disappointing. There's a part of BK that wouldn't be sad if you trade off Quandre Diggs and brought back Thomas on a low-end deal just to try to fix his reputation, give him one last year deal. And if you could somehow get it cheaper than what you're paying Diggs in this year's contract, save money while bringing in a guy like Earl, who I think is probably still a little bit better player than Diggs at this point in his career. But I don't know. Again, I probably echo Yami's sentiments that his career's probably done. Probably over. Hawk Pryor. Brandon, what do you think of taking a quarterback like Kellen Mond at the end of the 2nd or 3rd round? I know we have only 4 picks, though. And it could go down as low as 3 picks, Hawk Pryor, because there's some gray area here on the Nickerson trade that you made at the start of the year for the 7th rounder. So I don't know if we still have that one or not because it was contingent, I think, on him making the roster, or I forget what it was with that. But I've looked a little into it, and there's been some back and forth on that. That makes me really hesitant to draft a quarterback. You've got other positions. You need to find a corner. You need to find a left guard. You need to find a left tackle in the future. You need to find a running back. That's 4 positions right there for 3 picks that are a lot more weighted and necessary than getting a quarterback. So I would probably be really hesitant to go in that direction. The other thing with getting the quarterback at this point, when we look at this model, the model being of teams that have gotten to the Super Bowl and who've won the Super Bowl recently have done it with a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, or it's Tom Brady. Okay, that being the case, we want to maximize out that rookie time period. I don't want to kick away 1 year of that rookie deal. I want all 4 of those rookie deal years to build out the rest of the team around him. Ideally, you're getting the rookie quarterback on the 5-year deal, 5 years of club control, mid-first round, kind of like what Lamar Jackson finds himself in. And you can hold off on paying him for as long as he can while getting the most out of him at that point. To me, you wait to make that kind of move, Hawk Pryor, until you've moved off of Russell. You move off of Russell, then you bring in that guy. But I think it's a little bit of a waste of resources to bring in a guy like that in the 2nd, 3rd round and still be having Russell Wilson on this roster. I don't know that gains you a lot for the future by doing that. We've gone less in the direction now with quarterbacks of they need to sit a year. Giving them the year of maturation will make them so much more of a better quarterback, which was the old rule of thumb. I think it's changed a little bit. I think the advanced way that quarterbacks come out of junior high, high school, and college now, specifically the way that they've embraced the passing model. It's not just wishbone offenses and running the ball 80% of the time like it was back in the day when I went to high school. Now you got teams running spread formation concepts in the high school level. That's making these quarterbacks that much more advanced when they come out, that much more prepared to play in the NFL. So you don't need to have this. You don't need to have them sitting. There's less value on having a quarterback sitting, in my opinion. Rodney Presho. Sorry, Rodney. How you doing, HawksNest? I am doing awesome, man. Doing fantastic. I do want to comment on the defense. Carroll is loyal to his coaches. I feel it is loyal to a fault. Yeah, I think that where I'll give him props here with this guy that they brought over, Waldron, as an offensive coordinator, is he went outside of his comfort zone of what he knew. He didn't just grab. He's got a lot of coordinators out there he probably could have grabbed that were guys that had served on his staff before, but he went for the unknown. I would have liked to have done the same thing with when he was hiring Norton before and looking for something that's not what you necessarily knew. I mean, when you look at Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn, who've been his best 2 defensive coordinator hires throughout his time here, neither of those guys did he have a real prior relationship with. Bradley came from South Dakota, and I forget where Quinn came from, but it wasn't USC. So he brought in guys that, hey, these guys got a good reputation. He's a coach on the rise, he's a coach on the come. Take a look at him, Pete. And you go, okay, let me take a look at him. And not from that unfamiliarity. These guys with just new ideas that aren't going to be necessarily as beholden to just, being yes men for Coach Carroll. And I think that's the big problem here in getting a guy like Norton in here is you're bringing in more of a yes guy rather than a guy who's going to have his vision for how to run the defense. And part of this is on purpose because Coach Carroll wants to have his say on the defensive side of the ball, and he's kind of a de facto defensive coordinator. Let's face it, at one point or another. How much control does he really allow his defensive coordinator? But I understand where you're coming from. You can make that out. It certainly is. There's certainly a lot of validity to the fact that he is a little bit of the loyalty to the fault thing. Rodney says, why do people like or want Clowney? He is not a good pass rusher. He can stop the run, but that is it. Well, Rodney, this comes down to me a couple things. Number one, you mentioned a part of it. Number one, playing the defensive end is a two-facet approach. You got to rush the passer and you got to stop the run. And when you say, well, all he does is stop the run, when Clowney is in, he is one of the top three edge defenders in the league as a run stuffer. Pro Football Focus grades back this up, going back to even his time here in Seattle when he had only the 3 sacks. The next part of this is they've not a good pass rusher aspect of it. Sacks being your only metric for determining whether or not a player is a good pass rusher or not is a real limited way of looking at a pass rusher. The way I relate this, Rodney, is it's like looking at a pitcher and saying ERA determines how good a pitcher is or not. No, ERA was an old model of looking at pitchers' effectiveness. And it's an okay way. It still gives you a decent snapshot of a player. It's not a stat you need to just throw away completely wholesale. But we've got all these other statistics now that help us determine a player. Pass rush win rate, hurries, quarterback hits. And when you look at Jadeveon Clowney throughout most of his career when he's been healthy and playing, he's been a very good upper-level player in getting those pressures and quarterback hits. Maybe doesn't get the sacks, but does get those pressures, does get those hits, and he's an elite run-stuffing defensive end. You put all those together for me, and then you add in the fact that I'm getting him on a discounted prove-it deal. That's what makes me like it, Rodney. I'm not going to be able to go out there and pay Leonard Williams 5 years, $60 million this year. I'm not going to be able to go give even maybe potentially Yannick Ngakoue the 4-year, $40 million deal that he's going to sign, or Leonard Floyd the 4-year, $40 million deal he's going to sign. I may not be able to afford those guys at that rate. So I've got to go a little bit more of a discount. I got to go a little lower end. Sorry, one sec here. I'm just texting. Mom's calling, so Mom calls, you got to text her. Streaming, Mom. Gosh. But Rodney, I'm not by the way, I'm not married to Clowney on that. I'm just that type of deal, getting a guy on the low end. So Ndamukong Suh's another guy I mentioned on this. Maybe Ryan Kerrigan's a guy you look at if you think he's got a little bit of juice left in his tank. Yami says, disagreed. Look at the 49ers game last year. He wrecked them on his own. He is capable of that. He just wants too much money. Yeah, I think Yami mentions it right. And the thing to remember with Clowney when he was here, and that year that he only had 3 sacks with us, and everybody goes, oh, what a failure that move was. That was an awful move for us. He was our only pass rusher. He was also that year the most double and triple teamed edge defender in the entire NFL. When that's the case, when you're the most double and triple teamed edge defender in the entire NFL, you're going to have a lot harder time getting to the quarterback. This has been some of the phenomenal ability of what Aaron Donald getting the production he's gotten done from the 3-tech defensive tackle position, because he's going to get doubled a lot. And usually edge guys get to be singled up more often than not. So you've got to, it's these advanced stats with a guy like Clowney you've got to factor in. You really do. If he's got somebody else, if he's got Carlos Dunlap pass rushing on the other side of him in that year he was here with us, rather than 5 forks sticking out of my back, Ziggy Ansah, is Clowney a lot more of an effective pass rusher because teams can't double him all the time at that point? I think so. Dude, and that's what I'm trying to really drive to with this, finding this next defensive end guy, this prime guy, is it's finding the guy that is the bookend tackle who's legitimate opposite Carlos Dunlap. Carlos Dunlap, as good as he was last year, there was no guy that was legitimate on the other side of him. Alden Robinson had little flashes. LJ, I wouldn't even go flash with LJ. He'd give you a play here or there. And Rasheem, maybe a sack or 2, but he certainly didn't take that next step either. They need to find a legitimate guy as a bookend defensive end to what Carlos Dunlap does. And I think Clowney would give you that legitimate guy. I think he would. Nathaniel Parks, what picks do we have? Yes, so we have a 2, a 4, and a 5, as I understand it right now, Nathaniel. Maybe a 7th, depending on how it's ruled, that Nickerson trade from the start of the season. That's the one I'm not certain on. Y2KHA says, watching Jadeveon Clowney high school highlights is always a good laugh. He was a man amongst boys in high school, that's for sure. He was full grown, right out the box. I would not have wanted to have that guy run after me in high school. Y2K, so the Seahawks are 17th in cap space. The 18th team in cap space is over the cap. Super crazy offseason. The Buccaneers have $24 million in cap. They could potentially improve. Yeah, it's part of the nice deal with signing a guy like Brady to the $25 million a year, huh, Y2KH? Get the quarterback on the discounted deal, and suddenly you have cap space. It's almost magical in that respect, isn't it? So yeah, it's they're going to be in a good position, the Bucs are. Then they've got some young players that are good. I think they're going to have to pay somebody, though, as well. Don't forget that. They've got to deal with the O.J. Howard situation. They've got some things that they're going to have to deal with on their end as well. But with that said, they've got some ammunition to get it done. They absolutely do. Absolutely do. Yami says, shouldn't Clowney give us a comp pick, 4th round maybe? No, unfortunately not, Yami. Number one, you signed enough free agents last year that you offset any of the free agents that you lost. Number two, Clowney waited until he was off the cutoff period. In free agency, you get draft compensation up to a certain date. I think it's May 1st. And if the player is not signed after May 1st, then they don't sign anymore for draft compensation. This is to allow a player who might not be able to be signed because teams are so scared of draft compensation to be able to remain in the league and not be held over that particular barrel. So you're not going to be able to get any compensation back from him, unfortunately, on that deal. Nathaniel says, could we Jordan opposite Dunlap? Because the Saints are going to collapse. Oh, Cam Jordan. Could we add Cam Jordan opposite Dunlap because the Saints are going to collapse? Yep, you could eventually do that. I actually have the Saints cap situation written out here. So I did not write Cam Jordan down as one of my potential cuts that the Saints make. And when I didn't write a guy down, the reason being was that his negative cap hit would be too much to offset him being released. And I think Cam Jordan is that kind of guy. I don't think he actually saves them money by releasing. And they're going to have to specifically target guys who only save them money when they release or trade. They can't take any dead money hit because it won't make any sense for them to do that. This is why Alvin Kamara, for instance, is not going to be able to go anywhere. He's got to remain. He just signed his new contract. So the Saints are not going to be able to move off of him as a target. It's got to be any of these other guys. So I've got Janoris Jenkins, Quan Alexander, Latavius Murray, Nick Easton, Emmanuel Sanders, Marshawn Lattimore, Hill, Malcolm Brown, Morstead, Taron Armstead. If they cut all those guys, they basically get down like $74 million at that point. And they're $95 million, I think, over the cap. So they probably clear out the rest by getting creative. But I think those are the guys that they would probably are the more likely to be cut. Rodney says, I would really like to see Clowney back. I would really not like to see Clowney back. He's always injured and a crybaby. I would like to see the money go elsewhere. I understand Rodney, and certainly he's a guy that reputational-wise hasn't lived up to his draft status, and there's a lot of people in the league that are down on him, and that knee injury isn't getting any better. So that knee injury and that knee situation that still does remain a concern, and a valid one at that. It's more of just finding that type of guy. You know what I mean, Rodney? It's not necessarily Jadeveon. It's finding a guy, cheap guy, you're able to buy low on with a lot of upside, who provides you the legitimate bookend to Carlos Dunlap. That's more of the concentration point for me. But admittedly, too, Rodney, I am a little biased in this because I play often with Jadeveon's cousin, Jaharis, online, video game playing, and I still, every once in a while, will pop in and say what's up. I don't play the games that Jadeveon plays with our guy Heat, but I do have a little bit of a personal bias on this one as well, I've got to admit, too. Nathaniel Parks says, as long as we don't throw $7 million to a guy like Olsen, we'd be okay. Yeah, no, that was a stupid move at that time, and stupid move in retrospect. Certainly hurt, too, when he started talking about having buyer's remorse to Colin Cowherd this last week. Like, you got buyer's remorse? You got buyer's remorse, pal? You broke your foot just running. Who does that? So, yeah. All right. Well, we've hit the point, 4 hours, 3.5, 3:45 in. We're going to be doing 2 of these, so I am not going to go 6 hours a pop on these anymore. I think we've gotten through all of our questions. I think we're an awesome little live stream here today. We'll be doing these twice a week. If you guys got some topics you want to talk about in the next live stream, certainly put them down there in the comments. Thank you today for all the donations, your guys' continued support. If you are watching this in recording, post, or whatever afterwards and whatever, please do hit that like button and subscribe, notification bell. All these things do continue to help this channel grow. They really do. It makes me show up on the algorithm. So slam that like button. Let's keep this growth growing. We're just on the road now, we're kissing the door of 4,000 here on the road to 5,000 subscribers. So the growth just continues to pop up. If you know anybody that's a Seahawks fan, please do tell them about them. Please do tell them to subscribe to the channel. That's all I ask at this point, is we just continue our rise on up. Either way, I appreciate all of you guys. When's the next one? Y2KHA. So just look at my community tab, Y2KHA. I've now posted the schedule for February up. We're going to be doing Thursdays and Sundays, same time of day, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, each time a pop. So we're going to try to lock in and I'm going to stay on schedule with that, and maybe even do a couple of surprise shows in between that. We'll also be going live on free agency. I'll be live all 3 days of the draft. So strap in, folks. You're about to see a lot more of me on the up. And as well, I'm still continuing to work on those great Seahawks moment videos in the background. So nothing yet close to being done yet, but I'm working on a few things percolating in the background. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for making these streams amazing as always. It's my favorite part of my week. Anytime I get to hop on here and talk Seahawks shop with you. We got an off season here that I think we should get excited about. I understand some pessimism out there, but have some optimism too here, folks. Wait to see how it plays out this off season before you make your prediction that it's just going to be another year of the same old, same old. Let's see how it plays out. They may just surprise us. They certainly surprised me a little bit with that non-retread hire being Shane Waldron. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Appreciate all the donations as ever. And never, ever, ever, ever forget. Some of you guys out there forget. I see you out there. I see you forgetting. I see you losing your religion. Don't lose your religion. Don't REM me.